Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Novi Board of Education. It is Thursday, January 10th, 2019. You can see we have a couple of empty spots at our table this evening. We have a very exciting installation of our new board officers this evening. So I will turn to you, Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. We have received from the Board of County Canvassers for the County of Oakland the Certificate of Determination of the Election Results of the Novi Community School District. The official document states it has been determined that at the regular election held on November 6, 2018, Thomas E. Smith and Mary Ann Roney were elected to 6-year terms of office expiring on December 31, 2024. And Daniel Ruskin was elected to a 2-year term of office expiring on December 31, 2020. The revised school code provides within 10 business days after notification of election or appointment to the board, each person shall file with the secretary of the board an acceptance of the office to which the person has been elected or appointed. Prior to the member-elect performing the duties of office, the oath of office must be administered within 10 days after they have been notified of election results. This activity has already been completed for all 3 individuals. Tonight, I will publicly and ceremoniously administer the oath of office to Tom Smith. Lisa Rice will publicly and ceremoniously administer the oath of office to Danielle Ruskin. And State Representative Kathy Crawford will publicly and ceremoniously administer the oath of office to Mary Ann Roney.
Fantastic. So I think you two need to take the podium
Take a stroll.
for the acceptance of office of Mr. Tom Smith.
Tom wanted me to point out that he was the #1 vote getter in the election.
I did.
So we'll have to have a recount to make sure that was accurate.
Kathy got more.
So Tom, here's the oath of office, and I would ask you to repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will support
I do solemnly swear that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of member of the Board of Education of the Novi Community School District, Michigan,
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education of Novi Community School District, Michigan,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Doctor.
Next, we're going to have Danielle Ruskin and Lisa Rice. We switched the order for those of you following the agenda.
We would like a recount. Danielle, would you please repeat this oath of office after me? I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of member
the duties of the office of member
of the Board of Education of Novi Community School District
of the Board of Education of Novi Community School District
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Ms. Ruskin, if you would like to introduce your support team here, I know that they
Okay.
came to
Great.
watch this.
They deserve an introduction after all their support, right?
They do.
So my husband, Aaron Ruskin, Dr. Aaron Ruskin is here, and he is a great member of our family team, and I appreciate everything he does. I have 3 kids. My daughter, Sasha, she's an 8th grader at Novi Middle School, and you can tell she's really embarrassed because she's a middle schooler, so she's shaking her head at me. My son, Harrison, he is a 6th grader at Novi Meadows. And I have a daughter, Sydney, who's also an 8th grader, but she's over at the high school practicing POM. They are prepping for the regional competition, which is this Saturday, and she's videotaping a story for WNMS. So it was an important night for her, so we let her do her thing. My in-laws are here, Joyce and Bill Ruskin. And then, as I always say, it takes a village to raise a child, and my village is here with me. And I appreciate them.
Yes, you take your seat at the table. Absolutely. And next we have Mary Ann Roney and Kathy Crawford.
I'm going to do it a little bit different because in the state, I was just sworn in yesterday, ceremoniously, and we have to raise our right hand. So you better do it, I think. I think you want to make it really official. And I'm not going to make you repeat like bits and pieces of it. I'm going to read it, and all you have to do is say, I will. All right? Okay. You do have to say your name.
I, Mary Ann Roney,
Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Michigan, and I will faithfully discharge the duties as member of the Novi Board of Education according to the best of my ability.
I will.
Terrific. Would you like to introduce your family?
I better. I have my daughter, Victoria Roney. She was a graduate from Novi 2007. And then my husband, Edward Roney, my support staff. So it's wonderful. And then, of course, Kathy and Mindy. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks.
And if I may have permission from the board to say a few words, I would have graduated from Novi schools had we had schools back in the day when I was born in Novi in the 40s. So I wish I'd gone to Novi schools, but just to give you a little bit of background, Novi schools paid our tuition to go to other schools. So I have been to Wixom, Walled Lake, Northville, and graduated from Farmington High School, all the time living in Novi. So it was a very strange thing. So I'm glad that Novi has grown up now, and we have students who live here and go to school here. So very happy. So before I say anything else, I would like to introduce you to a new staff member of mine who is responsible for legislative issues, and she's the director of legislation for my office now. I have 2 new staff people. We only have 2 staff, so they're both new. But Mindy Fernandez is right here. And I'm sure you're going to be seeing a lot of her, or more of her, as she's going to be in the district a good deal of time. And I have another staff member in the office, and now you have my business card, and certainly you can call, and his name is Jason Wachowski, and he is the Director of Constituent Services. So anytime, believe it or not, you can call the office, and if I'm in committee, they are very capable of handling. And Mindy has young children in the Walled Lake school system and is she's particularly interested in what's going on in the schools and also very adept at knowing the issues in education. So I also wanted to come here tonight because January, the state of Michigan has said that January is recognition of school board members. And I can tell you that I think being a school board member is one of the most difficult and challenging volunteer positions there is in a community, but probably one of the most important. So in commemoration, one thing you maybe don't know is that there's over 90,000 men and women who are members of local school boards in the United States. And so in commemoration of this January school board recognition, I would like to say, because really you deserve all the recognition you can get, and I know that you don't get much recognition by the community for what you do. And I know the hours of reading are really, I was on city council for a while, and I know the reading is really, can be challenging, all the reading you have to do in the education.
I hope you're not scaring our newest board members right now.
It's too late.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, they've taken their seats, so we're good.
Yes, it's safe, you're safe.
So education really is a priority of mine. I was on the education committee last term, and I don't know if we'll be getting our committees next week, so I don't know if I'll be back on the education committee. But in any case, I am not going to do anything that's going to hurt Novi schools, I can assure you of that. I wish you the best of luck in the upcoming year and years of your service here as new members and returning members. And so good luck to you all, and thanks for doing all that you do, plus the administration too. I think they all deserve a round of applause from the audience.
Thank you. And now, if you would all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Next, I would appreciate a roll call vote, Mr. Mena.
Sure. Trustee Cook. Here. Trustee Hood.
Here.
Trustee Mena here. Trustee Murphy.
Here.
Trustee Roney.
Here.
Trustee Ruskin.
Here.
Trustee Smith.
Here.
Terrific. Next, we have the approval of the agenda. I've had 2 requests for changes to the agenda this evening. Under consent agenda item A, communication camp will move to action item C.
Excuse me, Ms. Murphy, can we pull that all the way to discussion? I went back and reviewed the video, and there were a number of things that were asked by the board, and we hadn't received. This will give the administration time to compile that stuff.
Some of those questions I think have already been asked. I know that they're prepared with some of the answers this evening. I don't know if you had additional questions that,
If you feel confident, that's fine.
that was the request, so I will leave it as an action item under C. And then item 8, which is the signing of the Code of Ethics, will be removed from the agenda this evening for discussion and action at a later meeting. All right, so we now have our student board member report, and we do have a student board member from the high school here, so I turn to you. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, my name is Caitlin Collins, and I'm the senior class president of Novi High School, and I'm going to go ahead and give you our report now. Alrighty, so for academics at Novi High School, midterms and finals week is Tuesday, January 22nd through January 24th. Good luck to all students on their assessments. For student and teacher activities, we are excited to announce that our orchestra and Novi Singers were selected to perform at the Michigan Music Conference in Grand Rapids on January 25th and 26th. There's a preview concert on Tuesday, January 15th at 7 p.m. in First Auditorium. All are welcome. Congratulations to our DECA students who competed at the district conference. We had 160 DECA members compete, and 129 have advanced to compete at the DECA State Career Development Conference in March. Great job, Cats. Congratulations to our theater students who competed at State Thespian Festival last weekend. The students competed in performance activities as well as college scholarship competitions. We had 4 students compete in the college scholarship competition, and the combined total that these students were offered in scholarship money was $214,000.
Wow.
AP registration will end on January 11th. Information is now posted on the high school website. Student Promoting Unity and Diversity hosted its annual speech and essay contest this week. Winners will share their talents at the 11th Annual Unity in the Community program on Monday, January 21st at 7 p.m. in First Auditorium to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This is an incredible event, and we hope to see you there. For athletics, a huge Wildcat roar is extended to our athletic director, Mr. Brian Gordon, who has recently been named the Oakland County Athletic Director of the Year. Mr. Gordon dedicates so much time and energy to educational athletics, and we are so lucky to have him at the helm of our school district athletic programming. This weekend in sports, boys basketball will travel to Brighton High School, while the girls basketball team will host Brighton High at home. Saturday, the boys swim and dive team will attend an invitational at West Bloomfield High School. The boys hockey team will play 2 games this weekend, first facing off against Northville High School on Saturday and St. Ignace on Sunday. Lastly, the Novi wrestling team will host the KLAA Wrestling Conference on match at 9 a.m. with 8 schools attending. On Monday, January 14th, we'll be hosting our first unified basketball game of the season against Brighton at 4 p.m. Good luck to all teams, and go Wildcats.
Fantastic. Thank you. Lots going on.
Yeah.
It's going to be a busy January. Fantastic. Thank you for being here. We are going to take a brief break so we can let our student go back to studying. And if there's some of you who don't want to sit through the rest of the meeting, you are also welcome to leave. We love you that you're here, though. So if you're here and you really want to stay, we love that, too. So we'll let you take a brief break. If you want to take some pictures maybe with your family outside, you can do that as well. Okay? So we'll be back. We'll reconvene at 7:20. It is 7:15 right now.
Yeah, it's.
Boy Scout
Okay, welcome back to the January 10th, 2019 meeting of the Novi Board of Education. I did notice that we did not formally approve the agenda, so I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
A motion that we approve the agenda as amended tonight.
Thank you.
Support.
It's been moved by Mr. Smith and supported by Mr. Mena. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. Motion carries 7-0. Next, we have our election of officers. I'm sorry, I'm closed out of my board book right now. We will be electing officers. Mr. Mena will call the name of the office. And if you would please just respond with who you would support for that position, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
So,
Sure. For Board President, Trustee Murphy,
Bobby Murphy.
Willie Mena, Trustee Cook,
Mena.
Trustee Hood,
Mrs. Murphy.
Trustee Smith,
Mrs. Murphy.
Trustee Roney,
Mr. Mena.
Trustee Ruskin.
Mrs. Murphy?
Okay, congrats.
All right. Next will be the office of Vice President.
Okay, Vice President, Trustee Murphy,
Mr. Smith.
Trustee Mena, Trustee Cook,
Mena.
Trustee Hood,
Mr. Smith?
Trustee Smith,
Mr. Smith.
Trustee Roney,
Mr. Cook.
Trustee Ruskin.
Mr. Smith?
Okay, congrats, Mr. Smith.
Next to the office, we will do the office of Treasurer next.
Trustee Murphy,
Mrs. Hood.
Trustee Mena, Cook, Trustee Cook,
Cook.
Trustee Hood,
Mrs. Hood?
Trustee Smith,
Mrs. Hood.
Trustee Roney,
Mr. Cook.
Trustee Ruskin.
Mrs. Hood?
Okay, congrats, Trustee Hood. 1, 2, 3, 4. For Secretary, Trustee Murphy.
Mr. Mena.
Trustee Mena, Trustee Cook,
Mena.
Trustee Hood,
Mr. Mena.
Trustee Smith,
Mr. Mena.
Trustee Roney,
Mr. Mena.
Trustee Ruskin.
Mr. Mena?
There, hey, at least I got a unanimous.
There you go. Congratulations.
All right.
All
There we go.
right.
So we have our new officers.
We have our new officers. So next week, your seats are all going to be mixed up based on that, but for this week, we'll stay where we are, and we will move on to our first opportunity for comments for the audience related to agenda items. This is the first opportunity for anyone in our audience to address the board about with comments about anything that is on our current agenda this evening. If there's anyone that would like to speak, we would just ask that you fill out a green card before you leave the meeting and give it to Mrs. Howley, which is in the back, with the glasses on, looking down, taking rigorous notes. Is there anyone that would like to address the board this evening? Any comments on our agenda? No? Okay, then we will move on to consent agenda A. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Consent agenda A this evening is the approval of the minutes from December 20th meeting and approval of field trips that have been taken within the past 2 years. And this, the field trips presented this evening are the HOSA state competition with the provision that if those students qualify for the national competition, that they would be able to go to that as well. And then the Novi Palm team state competition.
All right, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that the Novi Community School Board of Education approve the consent items as presented.
Support. Okay, it's been moved and supported. Moved by Mr. Smith, supported by Mrs. Hood, that we accept consent items A, agenda A, as presented. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same. Excuse me.
If I could make a brief comment, Ms. Murphy, on those consent agenda items. The HOSA state competition we have, Ms. Polonsky told me this evening, over 300 students who qualified for the state competition in HOSA.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations.
Ms. Polonsky's very excited to take 300 students to Grand Rapids, Michigan.
So the motion on that carried unanimously 7-0. So congratulations on the plethora of children that you will be accompanying there. Next is consent agenda B. It's our organizational items. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. These are items that the board needs to approve, and these are identified in our policies. One is the designate depositories for school funds, and so we have a list of funds that we will deposit money with in the community. Also, there are local and national banks listed there. And then designate those persons authorized to sign checks, contracts, agreements, and purchase orders. And then designate those persons authorized to use the safe deposit box. That's an easy one because we do not have a safe deposit box. Determine fee charge for individuals who request notice of board meetings. We currently do not charge a fee. Designate an administrator to assume the specified responsibilities of treasurer and/or secretary. We've identified the assistant superintendent of business operations to assume the specific responsibilities of treasurer. Designate the electronic transfer officer and the assistant superintendent of business and operations as the electronic transfer officer. Designate a law firm. Currently, the administration uses the Troon Law Firm to represent the school board. And then designate a day, place, and time for regular meetings of the board. And our regular meetings of the board, we have 2 meetings a month, regular meetings of the month, and they are posted on our Novi Community School District website. It is important to note, Ms. Minnick can identify, we have one additional bank that we have not used in the past because of our new health retirement account that takes in funds and then shares them appropriately. Ms. Minnick might be able to give additional information on that.
We needed to add Washington Trust Bank as a result of adding a health reimbursement arrangement plan that is associated with one of our Mesa healthcare plans.
Okay. That makes sense. Yes, did you have a question?
I just point out for dotting the i's and crossing the t's, it should be Washington Trust Bank, not back.
Oh, very good, thank you.
Okay.
So we would ask the board to approve these organizational items this evening as consent agenda B.
All right. So I would entertain a motion. Mrs. Hood.
I move that the Novi Community Schools Board of Education accept consent agenda B as presented.
It's been moved by Mrs. Hood. Is there support?
Second.
It's been supported by Mrs. Ruskin. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same. Motion carries 7-0. Next, we have our action items. The first action item is our board meeting schedule for the 1920 school year. We do approve this well in advance. There are times that we will have to make adjustments as we go through the year, but those will come up at another meeting. I would appreciate a motion on this first, and then if there's discussion, we can have discussion. Mrs. Hood.
I move that the Board of Education approve the 2019-2020 Board of Education meeting calendar, presented above.
Just a quick question or point of clarification. On September 26, 2019, is that a 7 p.m. start time?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And it looks like you've decided to alternate between Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings, because then we talked
Correct,
about that.
that's what we
Okay.
did this year.
That's good, okay.
Okay. So I have a motion, but I need support for it.
I'll support.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved by
Who motioned?
Mrs. Hood,
Oh, okay,
Made
I
the
thought
motion?
Smith did, okay. That's
and
fine.
Mr. Smith seconded the motion, and obviously it would be approval of the agenda with a 7 p.m. start time on Thursday night rather than 7 a.m. start time on the 26th. So is there discussion? Yes.
Sure. So I don't know if the athletic schedule is out for next fall, but usually, we.
I don't think it's out yet. We will check that, and if we need to make adjustments, we can look
Thank
at
you.
that.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. That is
Okay.
one of the adjustments that we regularly kind of had to make
Thank
in the
you.
past,
Yeah.
just depending on the schedule as it comes out. All right, so it's been moved and supported. Are there any additional discussion on that? No, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 7-0. Next is our personnel recommendations. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy, and I will turn to Dr. Kinzer.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. Tonight we have 2 new hires. The first is Jacqueline Kaschek, an English language arts teacher at Novi Middle School, and Robert Oakes, an HVAC technician in the maintenance department.
Dr. Kinzer, can you explain the hire of the English language arts teacher? What precipitated that?
So earlier in the school year, we had an instructional coach at the middle school take an administrative position in another district. Her position was filled by a teacher at the middle school, and this is a replacement for her.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. I would entertain a motion. Mr. Cook, excuse me.
I recommend that the Novi Community School District Board of Education adopts the personnel report recommendations as presented.
Support.
It's been moved by Mr. Cook and supported by Mr. Mena. Any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next is the communication camp. This was originally on our consent item because it is a camp that we've taken in the past. I know there were a few questions that I sent in. I'll turn to you on this.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Mike Ziegler, the high school communication camp sponsor, is requesting an overnight trip to the Howell Nature Center. The trip will provide an opportunity for 65 students to more effectively develop and maintain relationships. The program focuses on human relations while promoting cultural acceptance, appreciation, and understanding. During this 2.5-day retreat, students will participate in a highly disciplined small group session where they will learn about themselves, how to listen, how to express themselves, and will learn to celebrate their similarities and differences. Through their participation, students will gain leadership skills and to create meaningful relationships with people in their daily lives. Students will stay overnight in a dorm setting at the Howell Nature Center. Girls and boys will stay in separate lodges chaperoned by 15 Novi High School staff members. This program is modeled after the communication camp that Harrison High School has participated in for the past 10 years. The cost of the trip will be approximately $200 per person, which covers 2 nights of lodging, all food, transportation, and a t-shirt. Students will miss school on Thursday, March 14th, and Friday, March 15th. This camp will enable students to gain leadership skills to create meaningful relationships with people in their daily lives. And I know the board had some questions last year. Ms. Murphy sent those questions to me, and I sent those to Dr. Weber, and I think he sent those to Mr. Ziegler. And so we will entertain a conversation with Mr. Ziegler.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'll ask I know last year you got cut short by the winter storm.
Yes.
And had to leave early.
Yeah.
Usually we get a little bit of a follow-up. There's like a survey or something that's done. I don't know if something was done this past year.
So here's in order to make up we lost part of our second evening. Usually those events, the only full day we have usually goes until midnight with events. So we were cut short by about 4 hours there, and then we lost our whole final day. So to make up for that, we did a follow-up day that was hosted at the public library, and we restructured those events. It wasn't the normal third day of the camp. We tried to turn it into more of call it a reflection and advocacy day. And so I didn't collect any written survey data, which, in retrospect, I wish I had done something written, but we did breakout groups instead, where they returned to the groups they'd been in at the first day of camp, and they kind of reflected on how had they grown, what had they taken away, were there struggles coming back to the school environment, having had certain discussions, having learned more about each other, things like that. And then we spent the rest of the day talking about ways that they could become advocates in the building, the most ambitious thing being, are there clubs or programs that you would like to get involved in starting or joining or things like that, or at the very least different ways that you could conduct yourself on a daily basis to encourage your peers to think more about the way they participate in the community. So this year, if we can keep to our planned schedule, weather permitting, I would go the more traditional route of the normal planned events and then a written survey, which is what we had planned had we not gotten together in person a second time.
Makes complete sense. And last year was your first year coordinating, right?
Yeah,
So
since 2013 that we've done the program at all.
Well,
yes.
hopefully it will not get any worse. I want to say worse than that, but have to make too many adjustments. I also remember, I think it was last year's meeting, we kind of just talked, one of the questions was, is it possible to maybe do this at a different time of year? I know we've got HOSA, the very next, they're back-to-back weekends. That's a little tricky in terms of teachers being out of classrooms for 2 weekends, so.
Yeah, so when it was done in 2013, it was done very early fall. When I was asked to take on this position of coordinating it, it's not something that I could coordinate in fall. It's just a matter of personal. I'm on the Michigan Council of Teachers of English. Their state board is the secondary rep. I'm often participating in the National Council of Teachers in English, presenting that's in November. It just, the front end of the year, my CAL work, it's the hardest time for me. If the board feels very strongly that the first semester would work better, I would be happy to step away from the leadership role and let someone else fulfill that, and I could play a supporting role. But for me, it's just not possible to do the volume of planning in the first semester. And yeah, this weekend is not ideal that we have it on, but it was literally the only open weekend that doesn't interfere with something that's completely non-movable.
Right.
But I recognize the disadvantage of some of the things it's up against. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the thought and also the explanation.
There were concerns expressed about the number of subs that are used for communication camp. I would point out that HOSA uses a number of subs as well. Our Washington, D.C. field trip uses a number of subs. And so this is a volunteer activity for students. The students and their parents get to decide if they want to participate. Teachers know well in advance and can plan appropriate lesson plans for students that are in their classes that they will not be in. And so in the scope of the high school, this is a similar activity to other activities that uses a lot of teachers as chaperones and facilitators. And it's appropriate for those chaperones and facilitators to be our teachers because it is really about the interaction of students at the high school as opposed to another kind of conversation that they might have.
They're also social worker, I think it went last year.
Yeah, and we were able to, for I almost said non-essential personnel. They were essential. But their presence not being required full-time, we were able to let them do their work at the school, and they were sort of on call. I think we had one of them rotating at certain hours of the day. But, yeah, we were able to minimize their time away from the building. Yep.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions that I had. Are there other questions that board members have that they'd like Mr. Ziegler to address? Mr. Cook?
Last year, you were asked to provide an agenda, and you did that. But once we got the agenda, you were also asked to provide a little more detail on what Communication Training 1, Communication Training 2, et cetera, was going to be. We never did receive that. We're just to get a better understanding.
Training 1, Training 2 being the items on that.
Yes,
okay.
the items on the agenda.
Okay. I don't recall getting that request. Maybe I overlooked an email, so I apologize for that.
It wasn't via email. It was at the board table.
Okay. So each of those sessions is basically the same thing, which is that the students, once they arrive at camp, they are broken into teams, and they stay with those teams of 10 to 12 students, depending on how many we get attending. Those groups are supervised by 2 chaperones, a man and a woman, and those are the same groups. At each session, they have a 90-minute dialogue about a topic of their choosing. And so the first session basically serves as a model, and it's sort of like playing an open hand of cards, if you will, where we're modeling it, walking through. It's a real dialogue, but the 2 adult leaders are engaged a little bit more in the process to help them see what are positive communication skills, how do you listen openly to other people, how do you respond affirmatively to other people, how do you disagree while being civil and respecting other people's ideas. And then each session after that is the same structure, except they have complete control, and those 2 teacher leaders slide completely to the background. In other words, they are not intervening in that dialogue as you might in a classroom to redirect. The kids are practicing those skills of communication, and they're addressing topics that they have chosen that are relevant to, I'd say 90% of the topics they chose were just about issues they see themselves facing at school, challenges they see facing at school. Mental health became a popular topic. And then at the last session, it's the same structure again, but at that session, they can invite the 2 adults, which is why we like it to be teachers, to sit and actually actively join the discussion. So the dialogue now becomes between 10 students who have learned to communicate effectively and 2 adults who can share their perspective on the topic.
Okay. The other thing that you had mentioned last year is that you're going to give them exercises when they get back to school to follow through on it. And could we see, I guess, really like to see what those exercises are. Because, until... From when we voted on it last time to this time, I have not heard anything from it, period. I didn't even know you guys lost a day.
Oh, right. So
okay.
The loss of the day meant the training was kind of incomplete. So for last year, the follow-up activity was that second session. And so I wouldn't use the term exercises, but the follow-up activity, because the idea is to stay in touch with those students to try and see how they're taking lessons that they learned and sort of spreading them to other students in the building and applying them in their daily lives at school. We use that second day to kind of talk about what is the process, what are the ways that you can become an active member of your school community more. So they were doing everything from designing ideas for, like, I think one group was working on a club that might address mental health issues within the building and how to provide supports for that. Other people were talking about which clubs they might get involved with in order to address some issues that they had heard just within their own groups. And then after that, we weren't able to schedule another 60-person large event, but some kids went on to join certain groups within the school. I don't think any new groups were built from scratch, but again, this is a program that's designed to year-over-year build. Like, the reason you heard the number 65 this year instead of 60 is that 5 of the most exemplary student members from last year's session will return this year as student leader coaches, and they will help these kids in those communication sessions. And now you start to build up a larger cohort in the building that will always now, from now forward, assuming it's approved, be seniors, juniors, and sophomores who have sort of had this communication and leadership training, and you hope that that sort of snowballs with a little bit of teacher guidance and direction into more organic activities that the kids take on and plan and organize.
And a residual benefit that I know some board members attended on October 1st was the mental health dialogue and discussion at the Novi Public Library. A number of students who participated in communication camp learned those dialogue skills, were part of that. And if you were at that event, you really saw that in action when the kids broke the parents out into 2 large groups and the students actually led the discussion of the adults. That would be what I would say would be a measurable that we would see. I know the dialogue group that I was in, 2 of the kids had mentioned that I think one of the parents said, how did you know how to do this?
Right.
And they referenced communication camp.
Okay, and back in December, because it was December 14th that we had the discussion last time.
Okay.
You also stated that because of the discussion that was happened at the board table, you were going to go back and maybe take a look at reframing the communication camp to incorporate some of the things that the board members had asked or questioned. And did you do any of that, or are we following exactly the same as what was followed last year? What changes were considered, or any?
So what I remember from last year, you had asked if it could possibly be done on a weekend. I did not actively look into that. I think what we discussed last time was about the different challenges of getting the number of chaperones needed for that. There's also some philosophy in the communication camp of the idea of honoring the students' time, and the fact that when you ask them to take time out of school, you're sort of implying the importance of it to say, we're not going to take your time, we're going to use our time together for this. So it's built into the philosophy of it. I'm not saying it couldn't be done over a weekend, but I guess I took that as a possibility to be explored this year, as opposed to something that I was supposed to plan an alternative approach to, I guess. So maybe I misunderstood that one. If there are other specific recommendations from last year that you're wondering about, I guess I could speak to them, but I don't recall each of them.
It was a rather lengthy discussion
Sure.
that we had on it last year.
Yep.
And you did state that because of all that, you were going to take that back and look at reframing
Right.
it. And I was just wondering if you'd done anything in regards to that yet. So
I don't remember the specific reframing request. I remember that particular conversation that I mentioned, and I feel like there was one other item that you guys asked about in terms of the format of it. But if you're talking about the content of the event itself, I'd be happy to look at things if you email these specifics, but I don't recall what other recommendations were made, to be completely honest.
And then the last point was we had 2 board members that said they would support it for 1 year at that time.
Yes.
And based on getting a report afterwards and some of this other stuff, and looking into doing it on weekends and looking into doing it maybe in the summertime.
That was the other one that I just said out loud.
And, it's because of the shortened, the snow day you had, you were able to at least get one of the days in on weekends, so.
Oh, the other day was also during the school day.
Oh, you took them out of school to do that too, huh? Okay. So, I'm one of those that believes that the teachers need to be in the classroom. And, I didn't support it last year, and right now I don't think I will support it again. I hope those that said they would support it for 1 year, pending getting a report, which we didn't get until tonight. I hope they follow through and vote the same way, because, we asked for certain things, we did not get them.
So what would you like the report to include, just for future reference?
Basically, the report out you gave today, that we had this, they had
Right.
this dialogue and stuff like that.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be really detailed, and
Right.
I wasn't the one that asked for the report, but other board members did. Okay, and in particular, it was President Murphy that asked for the
Right.
report, so.
Well, I had a meeting with her afterwards where we spoke together about camp and how it had gone. But you're right, I did not submit a formal report. As far as the summer issue, I guess I thought I had addressed that at the board meeting last year. In that I feel like that's not something that's really within my control. I mean, if you're gonna ask teachers and students to come in for a summer event, the compensation's different, the organization's different. So I guess I could sit with the board to look into that. I did talk to the team of people that I took with me to chaperone, and it's not something that seems like it would be viable in terms of interest. So for what that's worth now, you're right, it's not a written report, but to speak to it, since you brought it up, it's not a popular alternative just because teachers have other devotions to family in the summer, and it makes it a lot harder to commit to something like this.
We seem to have no problem filling summer school with mathematics and things like that. So if it's important, if the students think it's important, I don't think we should have a problem. And if it's a problem with the teachers, can we look at putting it on to Schedule B or something like that, so the teachers are compensated for their time? Trustee Gudzinski last time said if it's really important to the teachers, why wouldn't they give up their time? Well, rather than giving up their time, let's make it worthwhile of their time, and maybe look at putting it on Schedule B if it's that important.
And from my perspective, two issues come to mind. One is that we would have to compensate teachers in the summer, which we currently don't compensate them now because it's part of the work week. The second bigger issue is that communication camp is really about the interaction that occurs at the school. And if you have it in the summer, then they don't have that experience to go back to try the skills that they have learned in the school environment. And so I think from my perspective, having it during the school year is the most appropriate time to have. I've been a well-known advocate that teachers belong in the classroom. But this is an educational experience for our students, just as the Washington, D.C. trip is an educational experience for our students, just as HOSA is an educational experience for our students. And so from my perspective, it is an additional educational experience for our students, and teachers need to be part of that experience. The teachers are well prepared. They know that they're going on this, so they leave plans for their substitute teachers. And so the days are not wasted in their classroom. Those days are meaningful days for the students that they leave behind in their classes. And so from my perspective, this is an important activity. It's an activity that helps students develop skills that not only will be meaningful in their high school experience, but more importantly, it will help them develop skills that will be meaningful as they move forward. We hear about 21st century skills that our students need to learn. These are the kinds of skills that our students need to learn to be effective: how to communicate, how to collaborate, how to advocate for their point of view. And so this is the kind of experience that ultimately truly does benefit our students. And so I think it's something that the board should support.
The other one, other board members said they would support it for a year, was asking to move it to August. And if we move it to the end of August, we can include the 8th graders that are coming in as freshmen. So you're including all 4 grades, not just 3. You can also, it was compared to band camp, athletic camps in the summer. Those kids are coming in on their own time because that stuff's important to them too. The instructors for that are being compensated for that through Schedule B. I agree that, the soft skills and everything are what we're trying to teach our kids. It to me is turned out the first time it came through, it was let's go do this, and we don't hear anything about it.
Okay, excuse me.
Hold on, I have the table, okay?
We did hear about it the first time we had kids that came and
Okay.
approached the table. I just wanted to correct you on that. That's not correct
Okay.
that we didn't hear back
Now,
from students.
we approved it last year. We asked for a report on it. We didn't hear anything on it. Now it's coming again here. This is one of those things that if we ask for something, I think we should get it. Okay? And if things are happening throughout the year, in a Friday update, it would be nice to know that those kids are doing something throughout the year from this. It's been seeming like this is go off, learn how to communicate, come back to school, and that's it. It's like a lot of seminars that many adults go to. You go in, you do it, you go back to work, and you get in your old habits. Okay? I'd like to see examples throughout the year, whether it's in a Friday update or whatever, that shows that this is paying off.
When you say Friday update,
That's what I do.
Oh, okay.
It's an update from Dr.
So
Matthews.
I'll be honest with you, I guess either when the term report was used last year or maybe I misunderstood something, but this being my first time bringing a program that involved a student overnight trip or anything of this volume to the board, I think I perhaps had a misunderstanding about the fact that a formal report was expected back. My impression was the idea of reporting back, as in when I came back to you this year to reset the program, we would be doing what we did tonight, which is I'd be happy to answer your questions and speak to the program and things like
So I
that.
think
So like I said, I regret not doing a written survey, which we had originally planned, and then when the third day got snowed out and we did a replacement day instead, I turned that into sort of oral feedback just because we had a chance to be with the kids again. And to speak to a point you made earlier, we did not take the kids out of school for an extra day. They didn't miss their third day of school because it became a snow day, so the day was still there, so to speak. But anyway, the missing report is my fault, a matter more of ignorance than trying to hide something from the board. My expectation was that this was the reporting out, not a formal submitted report.
Well, I appreciate Mr. Ziegler saying that it was his fault. Ultimately, that's the responsibility, my responsibility. I think there's two issues here. The first issue is communication camp an important activity for our students to engage in? I would argue that's an important activity for our students to engage in. If the board is dissatisfied because you didn't get a report, that's on me, not on Mr. Ziegler, and so I apologize to the board for that. I believe that it would be appropriate for the board to move forward on voting on communication camp, and then I will follow up to make sure that the board gets additional information after the camp so that you can see what the activities and the events were and how they helped the school and the students in the school.
And I will say for Dr. Matthews and Mr. Ziegler, in my 9th year here, I've never had the Board of Education ask for a report on a field trip. So why, Mr. Ziegler, how long have you taught here?
This is my 18th year.
18th year. So I think this notion of when you hear that term report and so on, knowing that in the time that I've sat here, never seeing the board ask for a formal written report from any field trip, and we've had many. I mean, one of the functions of the board is to approve those field trips, and they've approved many. Thank you for being here tonight and answering questions for us. Really appreciate it.
Yes, and I mean, I did send some questions, I think, Monday, that I knew that you would be contacted about answering, and I appreciate you being here to answer all those and the additional ones that came up this evening.
Sure.
So I still remember those first kids that went to the camp coming back and talking, and some of you may, and it still resounds with me, I mean, that they felt like it was pretty life-changing in many respects in terms of the way they approach other people and see other people, and truly creating empathy in our kids is one of those things that it's super important. I mean, so I'd be supporting communication camp. I think we should always be looking at different ways that maybe we can do it, and I would love to see on a macro level kind of that high school coordination of some of that stuff so that we're not, I mean, I get it, we're tight on time at the high school, but just in terms of having multiple, I'm guessing some of the same teachers will be out for both things, which you know, I know that stresses kids out when their teachers are out of the classroom.
Actually,
Their
Principal
teachers
Carter
are
said that there will be no overlap in
Oh,
chaplains.
no overlap. Oh.
And we also,
That's fantastic.
Part of the reason that these days were chosen, even though they're not ideal for multiple reasons, some of which you guys have already pointed out, I was asked to pick days that did not pull more than, I'm going to mess up the magic number, but more than X number of teachers from the district overall for cert days. And so there's a hard limit on those days were days, some of the very few days, that there were not a number of teachers out for other cert activities. So we really did try to pick days that minimize the number of teachers overall in the district that would be away from the classroom at a time. And that, I would say that came a little bit at the expense of days I might have chosen ideally, but I completely understand why it's something we have to take into account.
Oh, good. Well, thank you for explaining that. I appreciate that. Mr. Cook?
Okay, whether a report is normal for a field trip or not, it was requested at the board. You can go back to the 12/14/2017 recording, 1 hour and 38 minutes into it. It was requested, okay? I appreciate you really looking into the hard limit, which brings up another question. On average, how many teachers do we have out of the classroom per day in the district?
Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are the only days that we do professional development in the district. We do not do it on Monday and Friday. Looking at the report, I believe it was, well, let's see, 60% of our absences are personal leave, business, sickness, and so on. 40% are professional development. Our hard cap on professional development is 25. I know there's a variance depending on how many people are out being sick on a
You know
day.
what, do you think that's something maybe you could just include in the
We
weekly?
can provide that
I think
information.
that information, if you
Yeah, I
wanted
mean,
to
But
kind of.
from a district perspective, Dr. Weber and his department has really narrowed the scope of professional development done during the course of the year. But beyond that number, obviously, we also have the personal leave, personal business, sick days,
Right.
FMLA, all those kinds of things. And so, so the total number is larger, but from the number that we can control, we've limited it to 25 on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. We have over 400 teachers in the district, and so it's a small number of the total number of teachers in the district.
It fills up fast. That's the
Okay.
number I was referring to having to work around.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for the additional clarification. Did you have something?
I do.
Okay,
Is that okay?
yes.
I read through the material you provided. I just had a couple of questions, and I don't know if my thinking is right.
Okay.
So, and I know that in the audience, Principal Carter's here. So it looks like the only time that this was done was in 2013?
And last year.
But yeah, last year wasn't, can't really count because it wasn't really executed, but 2013 it was executed. Were you responsible for it in 2013?
No, but I did go as a counselor at the time.
Okay, that's
Or
fine. And I
chaperone,
think that was before Principal Carter was Principal Carter, but you were interim. So I'm just asking, since you guys are closer to that, or if this is for Dr. Weber, I appreciate you trying to provide or providing a way to measure something that came out of it. Can you share with me any observations or just anything that would speak more to, I mean, I in the community, I do think that our students would benefit tremendously from an ability to communicate more than just texting, which is, you know, and I also appreciate that you're starting with them waking up at 7 in the morning and their last session isn't done until midnight. So it's not like they're playing video games the whole time that they're there, which I think is awesome.
They have no electronics.
Right, so, but.
So, yeah, the part there, and Ms. Murphy, I think what you're remembering and then what triggered my memory was parents and students came, I believe, the second year we went forward, or 15 perhaps, to talk about and advocate for the benefits and came to the podium. I remember at least
Well, they also, it was a follow-up because it was the first year we'd approved it, and so they came back.
I want to say there was a year in between though, because I think in
Yes.
14
Okay.
there was the question of how should the
Okay.
counselors be compensated, and so they took a year to figure that out, and then they were going to bring it back in
I think it was
15.
15. So the anecdotals that came from that, Mr. Smith, were really around, I mean, one parent, I believe, coming up to the podium and saying how it absolutely changed her son's life because he was a person who hadn't been heard in his mind in there, having that chance for other people to get to know him. From the dialogue that we had on October 1st at the Novi Public Library around mental health that Mr. Ziegler was speaking to, at least 2 different times kids saying how transformative it was for them to be there. And in my mind, that's what we're in the business of, is providing opportunities for our kids to communicate, to learn about themselves, to share about themselves, and so on. So measuring, and actually Mr. Ziegler and I met earlier this week and having this conversation, how do you measure the success of something like that? You know, I tend to measure it in listening to people and honoring the voice of people who are saying what it meant to them in positive and profound ways, and listening to them like we would listen to anyone else.
Yeah, it's.
Am I thinking directionally correctly that the reason you concentrate on sophomores and juniors is maybe because, at least my one daughter, who's a freshman this year, when they come in as freshmen, everything's sideways anyway. It's like a whirlwind. So after they get a year under their belt, then maybe they're at least better equipped to go and participate in something like this. I like the March time frame because that gives the teachers adequate time to get to know their students that they're going to be nominating, and it seems like it gives them enough time to come back and practice some of the things that they learn. So I think from a time frame that works. Am I thinking about that? And are we getting a good's not the right descriptive, an appropriate mix of, is that part of the or the nomination process? And then is there a committee that reviews all those and decides, okay, here's our 60, let's go?
Yeah. Yes, all correct, yeah. And what you said about, especially the timeline doesn't have to be March, but that idea that they're supposed to get back and put this into practice, and now have to put it into practice with their devices back in their hands, with the normal stresses of school reapplied, among students who haven't had that training and the challenges of now interacting with people who have not learned new communication skills. And that becomes an independent process, and there's not an explicit next steps written into the program as it exists. Like Harrison's done it before, other districts have done it, but the point once they get back is sort of what does the district want to do. So I was about to say, if in terms of collecting data, a survey is a good starting point. I think you would get that qualitative feedback similar to what you said, the parents and students who talked about. If you want a number, I do know that I've had between 10 and 15 of the students went last year have already come and asked me if they can be one of the 5 to go back. So I know that there's that eagerness to be involved again. But in terms of other things, I already talked to my team of counselors about this. I think the next step beyond gathering that data, I would like to find out if there is space within this program where once they've gone through the camp and the training, and then once we've gotten back and collected some data and given them a chance to explore themselves back in a building setting, is there a next step that could become a part of this that asks them to somehow take on advocacy and leadership roles in the building? In other words, we say, you have some special training and skills now that other students do not. How can you use that to make the building better?
I think
that's an ambition going forward. I don't know what it looks like yet, but that's something we've talked about. If this becomes a regular thing, that would be our ambitions going forward.
Maybe a student board member.
It's a good ambition.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here, being so
pleasure.
patient, answering our questions.
Yep.
I do need a motion to approve the communication camp as an action item. I don't believe that we did that. It's been a while ago, but does anybody have a we did not, right, correct? All right. So is there a motion to approve communication camp? Mrs. Hood?
I will make the motion that the Novi Community School Board of Education approve the field trip communication camp as presented.
Great.
Thank you.
Is there support?
I'll support.
You heard Ruskin first.
Okay. So it's been moved by Mrs. Hood and supported by Mrs. Ruskin. All those in favor?
Hold it, we're just
Oh.
missed that, so there is more comment now. I was
Oh.
waiting patiently to
okay.
discuss this, so yeah, and thank you, Mr. Ziegler, for coming before us. I have no problem with this. This is the third time this has come before me. The first year, I had no idea what this was. I was a new board member. I know the board had a lot of questions around this. The administration was going to come back and get us some more information, but one board member had decided that she wanted to place on an action item and forced a vote, and that's why it was voted down in 2014. And at that time frame, I really didn't know what this was about. Then this came before us last year, and my biggest concern really hasn't changed. We've got 15 teachers that we're going to have out of the classroom for 60 kids. So when that happens, that's an expensive program. 15 teachers out of the classroom for 60 kids. So you can understand why a board might scrutinize a program like this. So last year, there was a lot of discussion on the table, a lot of questions. I know that Mr. O'Connor had mentioned that it was like Groundhog Day because a lot of the comments and a lot of the concerns came up yet again last year. I know that Mrs. Glodzinski said she would approve it. She didn't say reluctantly, but she basically said she would approve it this year but would really prefer to see this on maybe 3 Saturdays or maybe have it done in the summertime. Maybe figuring out a way we can pay a stipend for teachers in the summertime. Maybe having it in August might be better because then you have all these students prepared to help out at the beginning of the school year. I thought that was a great idea. But again, she really wanted to see a way that the model was changed. At that point, and I did look at the video, and I'm not doing this to play the gotcha game. My memory's not that great, but there was kind of a funny interaction where Mr. Weber had said that Ann must have bugged his office because they were in like thinking that there was already some communication going on in his office about maybe looking at better ways to restructure this. And there was some mention to say, well, band camp in the summertime, that's successful. You have athletic teams starting to practice in August. And then there was also mention that having in the summertime might have actually more kids be able to participate. And I think that really got Mr. Cook excited because I think he really wants more kids to be involved in this, especially given the number of teachers that we're going to have out of the classroom. Dr. Matthews had said that we would, he would ask that we approve it, but that he would go back and based on all the feedback that we had, that he would have some information to go back to high school administration to maybe restructure this thing. So clearly there's a lot of emotion around this particular action item, and again, this is the third time it's come before us, and there's been a lot of discussion. So I was a little disappointed that, given that this showed up as a consent item, I think it probably would have made more sense in hindsight that we just leave this as a discussion item so that we can kind of iron out some of these concerns that we have. Unfortunately, nothing's really changed for me. I mean, I don't see anything different in this program as far as anything that fixes my concern with 15 teachers being out of the classroom or 15 of our personnel. I don't really know what the mix is. I think that's a major disruption when you do the math. I mean, that's a lot of people out of a classroom for 60 kids. I think I mentioned this during both meetings last year, and really there was no feedback. So I think, in retrospect, I would hope that when this type of situation comes before us, that maybe there's some additional communication beforehand to board members, just letting us know that, hey, you know what, we went back, we looked at it, we listened to the board, and it just isn't going to work. We just can't do it any other time than when we're scheduling it now. And maybe I would have been up for listening to that, but what's being brought to me today is exactly the same thing that was brought last year, with none of the concerns being answered. So unfortunately, even though I think it's a great program, I think you do a great job with this, I just can't see how I can support the numbers that are going to be leaving the classroom for 60 kids.
All right. Are there other board members that want to weigh in on the communication camp?
Bobby, can I ask a question? Can we get clarification on how many of those 15 are actual academic full-time classroom teachers versus other personnel?
Do you have the list of teachers, Mr. Ziegler? Thank you. Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Last year, I want to say the number that were teachers was 12 out of 15. 2 of them were the social workers, so like I said, we're able to rotate in and out. This year, I don't know what the final numbers will look like because some of the people who were on board last year aren't able to come this year, so we're still determining what that team is. It is probably going to be majority teachers because, like I said, the sensitivity of them being able to feel like they can speak freely and openly. You don't want to fill those rooms with faces who are new and foreign to them. So I'm not going to come up here and pretend that it's ever going to be a ratio that's not mostly or largely classroom teachers and faces that they can trust.
Can you share with, when I came and talked to you, you shared with me something about some of the students that had been on that. I don't know, could you maybe share a little bit about the outcome Okay, so we've talked about how there's the number of people, the number of kids that feel like there's somebody they can trust at the school is lower than we would like, right? I mean, that's one of the things that, that came out of some other dialogue, or ed survey that we had. And you shared something with me about some of the, like the kids that come into your classroom after that experience, just needing someone to, I don't want to say dump on, but, you know, to.
Yeah, but that is what kids need at school, right? Is, you know, in the absence of a parent being there, or in some cases, the kids don't have even a parent figure at home. They're looking for that sort of person. It's not a primary goal of camp, but it's definitely a goal of the camp, is that they come back with more people to trust. I see a lot of those kids with those smaller groups of 10 to 12 that they spent most of their time with at the camp. They are definitely still interacting with each other, even though that we were careful to arrange them into groups of kids who didn't know each other, which I think is one neat outcome. But yes, I still get visits from kids who I didn't know before camp last year, and I wasn't even in charge of one of the breakout groups. I was trying to run around and manage everything, but it was still around them enough that they see me as a face to stop in and chat. And it was almost awkward the first couple weeks back. Kids were stopping to chat with me, and like I knew their names, but I knew almost nothing else about them because I wasn't in their sessions. But yeah, they're very much, they're seeking that sort of person, and that, like you're saying, it's almost like a safety valve for a lot of these kids, that you're providing someone for them that they know they can trust. And I think the other benefit of that is that a lot of times when they march into your room, they bring a little trail of buddies with them who maybe were not at camp. In other words, there's a contagion to that at least this group of 15 adults in the building, believe me, you can trust them. I interacted with them. They're people who will listen to you and believe you and take your side to the extent that they can do so. And I think that definitely changes the dynamic and atmosphere.
Okay. Thank you. I just thought maybe the rest of the board would want to hear that information too. Oh, yes.
I saw that there's a cost of $200 that the student would bear. I would suggest, and we haven't voted on it yet, but if it goes through and we try it for another year, that I wouldn't want that to stop or prevent any student from going. I see that the executive director for the Novi Educational Foundation is in the audience. I know that they have funds that could be used to offset that. I know that there's local business owners so I just would encourage you to make sure that the students that are being nominated by the teachers would know that that won't prohibit them from.
We have made it clear to them in the past, but we'll do it your way from now on, because that sounds really good. But yes, we've made it clear that the finances should not be a reason not to go. Okay. But thank you for saying so.
We do need to take a vote on it. Is everyone prepared to vote? Okay.
So sit down this time.
I will
Can we do roll call on this one?
Certainly, we can do a roll call for this one. Mr. Mena.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor of approving.
He's going to do that.
I know. Please, when he calls your name, say yes or aye.
Okay. Okay, Trustee Hood.
Yes.
Trustee Mena. No. Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Roney.
Yes.
Trustee Ruskin.
Yes.
Trustee Smith.
Yes.
Trustee Cook.
No.
Okay, motion carries 5-2. And just for next year, if you do a survey, Mr. Ziegler, if that can be given, the results of that maybe to Dr. Matthews' office, so we would get a feel for the outcome and stuff of
We'll
that.
provide a summary and additional information that comes out of the weekend, or the day.
It's always good to see the positive results that are a result of the programs. And thank you again for being here and being so patient, answering all the questions. Really appreciate it. Okay, we will move on to our information and discussion. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. According to the board policy manual, policy number 1001, organization and functioning of the board compensation, board members may be paid a stipend of not more than $30 per meeting up to a total of not more than 52 meetings, including committee meetings, as compensation for their services is determined by the board. The board, at its discretion, may elect to receive a stipend of not more than $30 per meeting for not more than 52 meetings. So tonight we present for information and discussion the two options at the two options. There probably are additional options that the board could consider, but the two options are that the board approve a stipend of not more than $30 per meeting up to a total of not more than 52 meetings, or the board may approve to continue past practice of not being paid a stipend of any amount for their services as determined by the board. And so this is an issue that the board needs to resolve. And if the board wants this to come back for action at our next meeting, we would bring this back for action.
So it's just discussion this evening, and this was a result of the fact that when we talked about it, there was some agreement that we would basically review this every year. So we'll be reviewing it. Even though we reviewed it, I don't know how long ago it was that we discussed it. Going forward, it'd be the first every year. So, Mr. Mena.
Yeah, if I may, on option one, is it possible that if we were to pass option one, that board members who would want to take a stipend could get a stipend, and those who don't want to get a stipend, not take a stipend? I mean, is that how you interpret option one?
That is,
The language is ambiguous, and so I think it would be, if the board chose to go that direction, I think it would be appropriate to have a recommendation that would say, the board approves that members may be paid a stipend of not more than, that the board approves that members would be paid a stipend of $30 per meeting, with the understanding that a board member may decline to receive that amount.
the language that it uses is board, not individual members, so I would say that it would need to be,
What's wrong?
yes.
I thought we talked about just leaving it the way it is. Because the way it is would
But we
imply,
have, we can leave it, oh, I see what
you know
you're
what I mean, the way it is, at least the way I read it, board members may be paid. So if Mr. Smith wants to get $30, I just let somebody know I'd like,
Ms. Minnick, you'd let Ms.
I'd
Minnick.
let Ms. Minnick know, put me on the list and pay me the $30 per meeting. I don't know if we need
Yeah.
to change it.
Well, no,
Well,
but we need to vote every year on whether or not we are going to.
Would allow that.
Would allow that.
I think he's arguing that you may not need to adopt the language that
Well,
I
it's,
suggested.
and that's always, and see, that's always been my argument, that this is one of those policies that we weren't interpreting correctly. I mean, there's a few of them out there that sometimes, I read it the same way, always have read it the same way Mr. Smith says it reads. I personally don't think that we have to vote on this every year, unless the policy specifically states we have to. The way I've always interpreted this policy, even though nobody has ever questioned it, is that, board members could, it hasn't been practiced, but the board members could ask for a stipend of up to $30 a year. And I think,
$30 a meeting.
$30 a meeting, and, yeah.
We'll give you $30 a year.
But, I think that makes sense. I mean, at some point, you may have a board member who may have the need to do that, I mean, it's not like there's no expenses for us being board members. You may have a board member that decides that, they need to take the stipend. I don't think it's gonna kill, is it gonna kill the bank here? I don't know if $30 a meeting for board members, even if all 7 of them took a stipend, which would break the bank. I don't think so, and I don't think it would cause any problems with teacher negotiations, would it, if we took a stipend? So, anyway, that's how I read it. I read it. I mean, we can get some clarification if we want, but
I think
for me, I'd say we strike this. If I had my druthers, we just strike this off and not talk about it again, and revisit this policy in the future. So,
Mr. Minna and Mr. Smith probably are correct. The policy, while it is ambiguous, on the one hand, as it is written, does say that board members may be paid a stipend of not more than $30 per meeting. And so it would appear, but the last phrase is the phrase that gives me a little concern, as determined by the board.
right, but that could
Which
be
is-
the amount.
Which is why we would need to discuss it at least every other year, because you've got a board, so you need to discuss.
This board won't change for 2 years.
Right, so you need to discuss it at least every other year.
I think the only way it would get goofy is if somebody said, yeah, this meeting I want it, this meeting I don't. From a planning, I think the argument came up from a planning standpoint, it would be helpful if Ms. Minnick would have an idea of what to set aside from a budget, and I just kind of laugh because it's a rounding error on her budget. So I think it'd be fine.
We're
if-
responsible for every dollar, Mr. Smith.
And I accept that fiduciary responsibility. So anyway,
Could I give a little historical perspective? I mean, no? So when I first came on the board, we did get $10 a meeting. I think the president got a little more than that, maybe 15 or something. I'm not advocating for that, I'm just saying. But the intent was that board members would be encouraged to do the professional development, because there's a cost to that for the board. So that was kind of why, at one point in time, I think they got the 30, and then they lowered it in order to, just to basically encourage board members to say, hey, this is the opportunity for you, the district pays for it, to encourage them to do that. I don't know if it did, I don't know if it worked that way, maybe it didn't. But that's just kind of a historical perspective. But it seems to me like we need to determine an amount that we would state, right? As determined by the board.
Right, but again, the policy already has the amount on it. It is confusing. I think every board member could read this and come up with an interpretation. I just happen to finally have somebody on the board who actually finally agrees with my interpretation, maybe two, I don't know.
This is current, right?
Yeah, that's our current policy.
So what would be more helpful if we said, let's just have it be $25 a meeting, or is that what makes it bad? Is that I could ask for 20 and Paul could ask for 25 and Willie could ask for 30? I would think all three of those examples are inclined to take that money and give it back to the athletic department, or a kid that wants to go to Washington, or a
After
kid that wants.
taxes.
From just a accounting perspective, it would be nice if there was a number. So you wouldn't have to look at the list every time and say Cook gets X and Minna gets Y and
Okay.
Smith gets Z.
Pick a number.
Well,
I don't know, you seem to, what's the number that you think would be appropriate?
I have been on this board.
No more than 30. It
I
can't
never,
be more
I
than
never
30.
kept the money that I got, so.
Well, like I said, maybe we should table this.
How about
This
this?
is information and
This isn't
discussion.
only
Yeah,
information
right.
discussion. Miss Minnick, I'm sorry, Mr. Cook, did you have something?
Yeah, I'd like to add in here. I'm kind of the one that pushed it for discussion, because it does say the board will determine the amount, okay? And I'm sure you were told when you ran, and the new members like I was, that you don't receive a stipend. But there's this policy that says you may, okay? So if the board says that, this board says we're not gonna receive a stipend, we're not gonna receive a stipend, I actually would put in, okay, let's say it, that we are not gonna receive, this board is not gonna receive a stipend. I don't know if I have support for that at this point in time, but I'll be the one to say it. The number is 0.
Yeah, I think we would have to change the policy. I mean, the way the policy reads is.
If the board
is the way-
determines the number is 0,
It's as
So you'd say
determined.
option 2.
option 2, the number's 0. That way, the money stays in the classroom where we want it.
You have support for that.
I mean, I
do
don't
you
have a
visit every
problem.
year? So
Historic-
this board can make a
We-
decision on what we
Historically, if I may, historically, we have not revisited this every year. Okay, the policy states that the board will determine the amount. This board will be in place for 2 years. We will not have to revisit it next year because it's the same board,
Okay.
okay?
Unless somebody requests it. and then
Unless
you
somebody
can-
requests it, okay?
Potentially.
Or somebody leaves the board.
Yeah.
Oh, true. Okay, Mrs. Hood?
I would say, I agree with Mr. Cook. I've never thought that us getting a stipend of $30 is really worth the trail of money where it has to go. So it starts out as tax money, it goes to the state, it comes back to us, we pay tax on it, I assume, and then we either keep it or we choose to give it back to the band boosters or some, and a lot of boards do that. So for me, it seems like if you want to give the NEF money, write them a check. And instead of getting the money in this roundabout way that's taxed and then it's received and that's taxed again. And so for simplification, I prefer no stipend.
Okay.
No, I think that's a little presumptive. I don't get in anybody's business here. I mean, we've got a board table here, people that live in some pretty big subdivisions. I think everybody here, most of us have, 2-income households. I mean, that's not always gonna be the case on this board. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't understand. I just find it so hard to believe why we can't just leave this policy sit and then have any board member, right, who has a need, and to recoup some of their expenses, just do it. I see absolutely no harm in it. I could care, I'm not gonna begrudge somebody who may have that
Well,
need
then
to
you
do
would need to
that.
say as determined by individual board members,
Yeah.
except instead of by the board. You would have to change the
Well, I
language
mean,
on that.
again, that's nebulous because you don't know what that's pointing to, what part of the, right? It's nebulous.
Mrs. Hood and then Mr. Cooper.
And I have no problem with that. As Mr. Mena has described it, I have no problem with that. What I object to is the either or. So if we all vote to take a stipend, I don't want a stipend, but I don't care if somebody else chooses to take a stipend. So I don't like the either or. I don't care
So
individually.
what you're saying, you would be okay to have a policy where board members could take a stipend, but not forced to take a stipend?
Right,
Okay, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
but I
that's
think
exactly how
I don't know, this
We
policy.
can clean up the
Well,
policy
yeah.
just
You
to
know what,
make, but I
we
think that's
do,
how it reads.
we do have Mr. Sutton coming on Saturday. Maybe we can just
We could get
ask
some
him,
clarification, yes.
if there's a way to rework that. I'm sorry, I forgot.
And,
Mr. Cook.
yeah, this is just a stipend for us attending meetings and stuff. There is also a policy that states that our expenses for board business is reimbursable. And most of us don't do anything about that, so.
Yeah, and probably because I would probably spend more time and energy in reimbursement than the money that I would ask for reimbursement.
And to put it in
Just not
perspective,
even
it's
worth my
just over
time.
$10,000 if we were to take the maximum.
For the entire board, for the entire year.
For
if it's
52
coming-
meetings.
So what I'm
Up
hearing
to
is we need a
52
little
meetings.
clarification. This is an exciting first meeting for you two, I think.
Oh
We need some clarification from an attorney on the policy.
Yep.
Kevin will be here on Saturday, so
Yep.
maybe we can get that information from him, since he's our policy provider.
I'll alert him.
And then, it sounds like there's different thoughts, and maybe if you have other questions about that, maybe send them my way, and since this is a board issue, if you have questions about it, just send them my way, and then I can either
We'll bring it back
Kevin,
to the
or we
board.
can, or I can get a sense of where people are at and wordsmith some language with the assistance of Mr. Sutton. Does that make sense? Okay, so I will put that on my to-do list, and, please feel free to call or send me an email with your thoughts on that. Okay, and then it will come back, and hopefully we'll have some language that we can all live with. Okay, next is student growth. Dr. Matthews. Oh,
Mrs. Murphy,
yes.
did we skip the personnel report?
no, we approved
No,
it.
we didn't.
It was just a while ago. We had the communication camp afterwards. It happens, that's okay.
Thank you.
We talked about the ELA teacher.
Yeah, you made the
Yes,
motion,
we
don't
did.
you
We
remember?
did, yes, we did.
No, I'm just kidding.
Good grief. I
Okay.
apologize.
So student growth. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Jeff Dinkelman, our Director of Student Growth and Accountability, and Dr. Gary Kinzer, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, are going to present information to the board regarding the student growth requirement for the 2019 teacher and administrator evaluation. As they make their way to the podium, I will mention that there was conversation in the legislative session last fall, and that even in lame duck of changing the student growth, because for 18-19, the student growth portion has gone from 25% to 40%, and there was conversation about taking it back to 25%, and there still is conversation in the board, or in the legislature, about whether or not they should do that for this school year, and so we don't believe that they will change it, but they could. But tonight, Mr. Dinkelman and Dr. Kinzer will give you an overview of how we, in our district, are going to implement the student growth requirement for teacher and administrator evaluations. Dr. Kinzer.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. First of all, I do want to say thank you to Jeff Dinkelman, who has worked really hard with me to develop this model and to communicate with teachers and administrators throughout the district. So we've been busy, and we're excited to share with you tonight. So first, the why behind all of this. So back in 2015, our legislature passed Public Act 173, and it mandated that student growth be a component of educator evaluation. Our legislators said that for the first 3 years, 2015-16, 16-17, and 17-18, it would make up 25% of every teacher and administrator in Michigan's evaluation. In Novi, we broke that down in half. 12.5% of the total evaluation was student assessment data, and the other half, the data conversation, so the conversation about the data that took place between teacher and administrator. So this is just a visual representation of that same information. So beginning this year, now the change. The state requires now that 25% become 40%. And for teachers in grades 4th through 8th who teach English language arts and or math, state assessment data make up 50% of the growth component. So 50% of the 40%, or 20% of the total evaluation. 4th through 8, because this is focusing on M-STEP data for most of our teachers, and 3rd grade is the first year that we give the M-STEP assessment. That's when the baseline's set. And then beginning in 4th grade, we can measure growth from the baseline. So 4th through 8th, English language arts, and math. So that's a portion of student growth. What's the rest? So the state says that we need to use multiple research-based growth measures and alternative assessments that are rigorous and comparable across schools within the district, the ISD, or PSA, and they may include student learning objectives, or we call them SLOs, or nationally normed, locally adopted assessments that are aligned to state standards. Here in Novi, that means NWEA. So we're using both of those to measure the portion that is not state assessment data. The other 60% is just as it has been for the last several years. The Marzano model, we've listed all 4 of these assessments that we use, or models that we use in Novi. The focused teacher evaluation model, non-classroom instruction support personnel evaluation model, school leader, and district leader. And then a reminder that this does not just pertain to teachers, but administrators as well. So for school level administrators, an aggregate of all the student growth scores of teachers assigned in that building. And then for district administrators, this is an aggregate of student growth scores of all teachers in the district. So you've spoken often about superintendent evaluation model. Just a reminder that you only really have control over 60% of that. The other 40% is student growth data, just like it is for the rest of our educators in the district. Just a visual of that. So there's a 60-20-20.
So with the addition of student growth percentiles, so we're looking to track growth from one year to the next, and there's quite a few things that I will say about the state, but this is the one thing, or one of the things that I think that they've gotten right with the student growth percentile is that they're really focusing on growth and not looking at just hitting some mark. And so with the student growth percentile, they actually separate the students into subgroups of where they started and how they moved as compared to every other student in that group from year to year. And so each teacher will receive a student growth percentile score. Each student will receive a student growth percentile score, and then a teacher will get an aggregate score of those scores each fall. So that particular score, the student growth percentile score, will always be a year behind. We take the M-STEP in the spring, take the MI axis in the spring, we get those scores in and around Labor Day. So for this year, we already have those M-STEP scores for our teachers, and so the student growth percentiles. And so we're using the, based on the MDE recommendation, we take the student growth percentile score for the teacher, and that translates into a 4.321 score for the highly effective, effective, minimally effective, and not effective. One of the things that not only Novi but many other districts are using is the idea of a shared attribution. For the longest time, when we've talked about student data, it's been based solely on a particular teacher and what they've chosen to use within the model, much of it based on achievement. With the shared attribution piece, what we feel and what we think we'll get out of that is the idea that we're all in this together, and we won't have 5 elementaries with 25 classrooms within each elementary that are looking to work within a silo, but we think that we can get grade level spans and more buildings working together with this shared attribution piece. because we feel that you can look at a building or look at a grade level, and people are working together on this. And it's a collective effort. So it's more of a, when we look at SGPs, we're sharing scores across the district versus drilling all the way down to the individual teacher. And we feel that we would do that also with the other scores that we're working with. And so these are just little handouts that we used at the individual buildings that kind of break down the types of teachers we have as far as categories. So we have K through 3 classroom teacher, and we have a 4th grade classroom teacher. You'll see that on all of these slides, the Marzano evaluation model at 60%. That's the blue part of the pie. For our K through 3 classroom teachers and our 4th grade classroom teachers, the pieces that make up their student growth are the M-STEP, the NWA, and the student learning objective. They're the same pieces, but the pieces are of different sizes because we have to use 20% of their evaluation in 4th grade to be the M-STEP score. We have zero choice in that. And so, but we also don't feel that the 4th grade teacher is the only one that's responsible for getting that student to that score in 4th grade. And so that's why you see the same pie pieces moving K through 3 up through 4. And so because we don't receive a score in 3rd grade or any grade below, that's where we begin to see the shared attribution piece of M-STEP and NWA. And again, you can see it's for our 3rd grade teachers, it's a shared 4th grade score for M-STEP. For our NWA scores, those are shared district grade level scores. And then we get into the student learning objective, which could be an individual one if the teacher chose to, or as a singleton type teacher. We have a few of those in different grade levels. But we really are encouraging teachers to work on teams together with this. 4th grade, same idea, but again, we have to abide by the 20%.
Can I ask a question before you? That's okay. So what I heard you say is the M-STEP ELA, the math for K through 3, is actually the 4th grade score.
Yes. It's just going to be applied at a different percentage level.
Okay.
So the score, which is a 4, 3, 2,
Okay.
1 type score.
But you're seeing that they all got them to that point, so
Right.
they would have, a portion of theirs would reflect how well they prepared them for
Correct.
that. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was
No, please.
thinking correctly.
Please
on
feel
that.
free to stop at any time.
Okay,
I'll go on all night about that.
okay.
So
we
our,
don't want that.
So again, our 4th grade is the same type of thing. We just have to reduce some of the NWA. We tried to maximize the student learning objective every place that we could. And I'll talk in a few minutes more about the student learning objective, but we feel that this gives us the opportunity to have that reflective conversation with our teachers about the data that they're working with and the students that they're working with. So this is the other category within our K through 4 buildings. We have our special and our non-classroom teachers, and you can see the bulk of it is the student learning objective. But again, having that shared attribute of the M-STEP score. So 5th through 8, we have 5th through 8 ELA math teachers versus 5th through 8 non-ELA, non-math teachers. Same thing, 60% for the Marzano evaluation model. We still have the M-STEP score, we have the NWA, and we have the student learning objective for our those who teach math or ELA. Because in 5th grade we begin to teach more subject area specificity, we put the word "or" in. In K through 3, if I go back a quick sec, this is ELA and math. Our K through 4 teachers teach the ELA and math to their students. So there's a single teacher who teaches that. Beginning in 5th grade, we have a teacher who teaches ELA, and then we have a different teacher who teaches math. We have, even at Meadows, we have no teachers who teach both ELA and math. And so it'll be a single score. It'll still be a shared attribution across the building this time of 5th and 6th grade and 7th and 8th grade, but it'll be subject area specific. Same thing with the NWA, shared across the building, but subject area specific, and then 15% for the student learning objective. For the 5th through 8 non-ELA math teachers, we go back to the 35% of the student learning objective, so really focusing in on that piece with the 5% of ELA and for math and ELA. That's a combined score.
And is that because we don't give the Northwest doesn't have that portion?
So
NWA, I mean.
So for
Sorry, I'm old
NWA, the two tests that we give in the fall and the spring for NWA traditionally has always been the math and the reading.
Okay,
And so
okay.
we felt it.
That's what I
focused on
thought.
that. Yep.
Okay.
And then for our high school, again, 60% for the evaluation model, and then the student learning objective is 35%. With this one, you see a change away from the M-STEP because we don't give the M-STEP in the high school. The 11th graders take part of the MME of the science and social studies, but specifically what we've begun, or what the state has begun to give is the PSAT 9, the PSAT 10, the SAT 11th for ELA and math. And when we talk about PSAT, this is only the spring test. This has zero to do with the fall PSAT that we give for the National Merit Scholarship. This is only the one that is administered in early April. This will be a one-time only thing because this year we will begin to give the PSAT 8, or the state will require that we give the PSAT 8. So next year it'll be 4th through 7th grade, and then we'll have PSAT 8 through SAT. So again, much of this is based on the idea of a shared attribution, in helping our teachers know that we're here to work with them to grow, and that the safety net is wide, but also allowing us to be able to go to our teachers who might not be, who have the same type of score, to work with them and have them know that we're there for them, and that we feel that we can grow our teachers as good, if not better, than anybody else.
Okay.
So this is what we're calling a short cycle timeline for this school year. Jeff and I worked on developing the model throughout the fall and began discussing this with administrators in October, November, and we're ready to share with our teachers at the buildings in December. So we traveled to each building. We shared a presentation where we talked about the growth model, as we just did for you. We spent most of our time talking about student learning objectives, and we're going to do that for you in just a minute as well as presented this calendar. We also did some professional development in December for our principals, who are now delivering that same PD in January for teachers on how to develop a SLO. They'll be doing that this month. Teachers will work on their SLOs. They will be submitted to administrators by February 1st. Our principals will approve them by the 13th, and then the window when teachers will work on that SLO will run from February 20th to May 8th. That does not mean that everyone's SLO will run that entire amount of time, but that's the beginning and end of the window. And there will be a variety of windows, that teachers and groups of teachers take on. Mr. Cook?
Yeah, a couple of quick questions. The SLOs, the teacher's going to have one for every student, right?
It is one. It is not necessarily for every student, although it could be. So when we're going to get to the template in just a minute, where you'll see how teachers will develop the SLOs, I think it'll be clear.
Okay. Then the other thing is the building has an aggregate score, and then the administrators have an aggregate score. Is the aggregate score taken into consideration, class sizes and the likes of that?
Is it weighted?
Yeah, is it weighted for class sizes? Because Parkview has almost 700 students, and where Village Oaks is down around 400 students. Sometimes you have five sections of 4th grade in Parkview that may only have 19 kids in it, but you only have 3 in Village Oaks, and they have 21 in it because we only have 3. So is any of that taken into consideration in the aggregate?
No. I mean, simply put, no. Our schools, when you look across our district, seem to all do right around the same. While we have 350 at Orchard Hills and close to 600 at Parkview and Village Oaks, the diverse makeup of each one of our buildings and class sizes and all those different things don't make it into the category, or don't make it into the calculation.
It's not worth weighting. It's the factor is so small.
I'm sorry?
It's not worth weighting, the factor is so small, or have we
I
even
can't
tested the
tell
model
you the
with it in there?
standard error. I can't tell you the standard error between the buildings, but the fluctuation between our buildings is not very big as I've seen in other graphs and data given to us at the county and state level. We have, barring the A through F piece, our schools will always look pretty good. very well. Not to say pretty good, because now we see that commercial that I don't want pretty good. Our schools look great. And when I go to our county meetings, I don't like to say that I'm from Novi, because they look great. But I understand what you're saying, but my guess would be the standard error within our buildings, within our classrooms is so small as to it won't make any difference. To give you an example, we have approximately 150 teachers who would qualify for an individual SGP score. Only 3 of them got a 2 or lower.
What's a SGP?
Student growth percentile, that
Okay.
score from the state.
Okay. Okay.
And so of those 150 who actually qualified for the score, for an individual score, 3 of them would have gotten a 2 or lower, and all 3 of those we would have considered the makeup of their rosters because of the student population, student groups that were rostered to them.
Okay.
But everyone else would have gotten a 3 or higher.
I think a really simple way of saying all this is that if you go back and look at our 4th grade M-STEP data across the district by building, you'll see very similar scores.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
You sure you don't want to do it? So I'm just going to pull this up real quick. So student learning objective, or it's all right. Let's see.
I think we took too long.
Oh, it was on the screen for too long, maybe. Technical difficulties here. They still happen. Okay, terrific. Back in business.
So the student learning objective piece, as Mr. Cook asked, can this go down to the student level? Yes. It could also go all the way up to a course level piece, as far as all of the Algebra 1 teachers get together and begin to look at this. So class levels, I'm looking at all of the students within a single class. Course levels, I'm looking at all of them across a course. Multi-course, Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 are going to get together, or ELA and theater are going to get together. So multi-course. Targeted is I'm focusing in on a small group of students that I've identified for some type of support. And so the interval of instruction in a normal year, a SLO would run anywhere from 10 to 20 weeks, because we're looking for long-standing change and for students to really fully understand and cement the learning that we're trying to help them achieve and the growth that we're looking at. And so this template is taken directly from the state of Michigan. This is their SLO template. We've slapped our name at the top, put our logo up in the upper right-hand corner, but this is the MDE template. And so it just walks us through some different things that we're asking teachers to consider as they build this. Is student population. What set of students am I looking at? Am I looking at my whole class? Am I looking at a targeted set of students? We see this as a way to coincide with our MTSS system. We could focus in on students that might be struggling with something. We could focus in on students who need enrichment with something, who we want to go above and beyond with. So the student population is just the students that we want to look at. Learning standards or competencies. What are the standards, skills, competencies that we're hoping to focus in on with the students? The baseline data is just the data that was reviewed to create this. And how did the students, basically, what is the starting point? So at this moment, I measure my students, and they fall into these types of categories. And so what I want you to consider is that the baseline data is the starting point, and the assessment is the finish line. And so think about it as the track around the football field. And so if all of us went out there right now and ran that lap, and so not all of us are going to cross that finish line at the same exact time. And if we have a certain amount of time, and after 1 minute we take stock of where we're at, the assessment is just the finish line after that 1 minute. And so the baseline is the starting point. The assessment is, when is the next point I'm going to take stock in the learning? What we're hoping for teachers to understand is that we don't expect everyone to hit that finish line, because that finish line is just where we're taking stock. It's not where learning ends, because learning never ends. And so you can see with this next piece is the growth target. Based on me as a teacher, knowing my students, I'm going to set growth targets for all of my kiddos, be it the targeted group that I have or the whole class that I have. And so when I know that they have the baseline data starting point, and I know that I'm going to take stock again at the assessment, how far do I think they're going to grow in between those two time periods? Knowing full well that if I set a challenging and rigorous but yet attainable growth target, that some of my students may not make it. But what that'll also do is help me as a teacher understand there's certain things that I'm trying during that period between the baseline and the assessment that aren't going to go as planned, so I need to try something new. And what are those new things that I'm going to try? And so the growth targets are where in the spectrum am I going to, where do I think that my students are going to grow to between that baseline measurement and the assessment? In prior years, it is my feeling that there have been times when we set growth targets that were, because we made achievement a very big part of the teacher evaluation, I did one of two things as a teacher. There was times that I set growth targets that were low, that the bulk of my students hit that, or I focused in on students I knew would hit my high growth targets. We feel that with this student learning objective, because of the fact, and I'll come back to why I think that in a minute because I want to get to the end. The growth targets are set by the teacher, and then the rationale is why do I think that those growth targets are set that way? And then one of the big things that we have is the instructional strategies and interventions. So what am I going to do as a teacher to help these students reach their growth targets and show that how I'm going to monitor the progress? And so that is a super important thing. That's something that really coincides with the Marzano evaluation framework that we use. That's one of the questions that we ask our teachers when we're observing them. And so that's it. And I don't mean that's it. Well, look how easy it is. What I mean by that's it is that there's no spot on here that says what % of your kids hit your mark. Because if we make it about hitting a mark, that's going to adjust how I pick the mark. If we make it about how did I respond as a teacher and what is my reflection on the process in which I went through to design, implement, and evaluate this student learning objective, that allows me as a teacher to set rigorous yet attainable goals without the fear of being penalized that I didn't hit some mark. Because when we've used our data evaluation tool that we've used in the years past, it was very much about achievement, and it was about hitting a mark. And so one thing that we will add to this is a reflection piece box that talks about what are the reflection that you have along the way. The SLO approval committee is not some super secret committee. The principal is the evaluation committee. We just haven't taken that off because it's kind of, whenever we show this to teachers, they think it's funny that there's going to be some committee. So are there any questions about the student learning objective form as it is?
Board members? Anybody?
Probably a more general question.
No, thank you for walking us through it. I appreciate that. It's a lot of information to digest. Mr. Mena just said we probably.
We're not quite done.
Almost done.
Oh,
So,
I knew that. Okay.
I want to reiterate some of the points that Mr. Dinkelman made. This is the rubric that administrators will use to evaluate, and you see it's in draft form still. However, it emphasizes many of the points that Mr. Dinkelman made. So our administrators are not evaluating how many students met the goal. This is much more about process. This is about the quality of the goal. Is it rigorous? Is it meaningful? What are the assessments that are being used to measure, both at the end as well as progress monitoring along the way? What are some of the targets? And most importantly, what is the reflection done by the teacher overall of the SLO? So how did students do? Why does that teacher think it was successful? Why did some students struggle? What adjustments were made along the way? What might that teacher do differently next time? We really believe that the value in the SLO is the process, the reflection, the conversation that happens between the teacher and the administrator at the end of the process, and that's where growth will happen. So we will fine-tune this rubric so that it's not quite where we want it yet, but we're getting close.
Great. Great, thank you for the links to all those reference documents. I'm sure that I will be reviewing all of those later.
If you're interested, this is how the growth calculation happens as far as the different grade levels and the teachers that we have, as far as the weight versus the score, and how it all turns into a final score.
And then this is a very simple slide. This is just at the end of all of this, 60% of the teachers' final effectiveness rating will be based on the Marzano model, 40% student growth. And then you can see the 4 potential effectiveness ratings at the end. Mr. Mena.
So when does the evaluation period start? The only reason I'm asking is because I know, and I've been kind of tracking, there's a bill going through the House right now that's going to potentially reduce that percentage from 40 back down to 25.
So the student, you're specifically referring to the student growth piece, not evaluation as a whole.
I was talking about the student growth piece.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
So we have the SGP part already, so we can plug those numbers in now. The piece we don't have is the slow part. So we're developing those slows, or the professional development with teachers started in December, continues in January. Teachers will submit their slow to administrators for approval by the 1st of February. They'll be approved by the 13th of February, and then teachers will work on those slows from the 20th of February to the 8th of May. And then teachers and administrators will get together. Administrators will do that final evaluation piece using that rubric and convert it into a numeric rating, which will go into the overall equation.
So if the law changes here in the middle, you guys will be able to adjust for it pretty quickly.
Nothing would really change except for the weights.
Right.
That would be all.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Cook?
So are all students going to be covered by a SLO? You say a teacher can pick out a subgroup in their class and focus on them. I'm just curious, because our goal is that all students, it says all students. It doesn't say some students, it says all students.
Well, the SLO is designed for teachers to make choices about a specific area. They're not designed to be whole classroom goals, and we think that's a positive thing. We think teachers should focus, and it does align nicely with our MTSS model. For example, I would love to see, say, a second grade teacher focus on just a group of students in his or her classroom that are below a benchmark, say, in a reading measure, and focus specifically on how to help those students get to where we want them to be by the end of the SLO window. So to me, I think that's more meaningful than evaluating all 22 students in that second grade teacher's classroom. So that's a good way of measuring the work done by the teacher to help students grow.
There's an important consideration that the evaluation is a separate piece from our district goals. Our district goals talk about all students will grow, and so as a district and as a school and as a teacher in the classroom, you're focused on ensuring that all students will grow. The evaluation piece creates the opportunity to mix and match some of the student growth pieces.
But the evaluation piece is where it feeds into our goal. Our goal is that all students will grow. Mm-hmm. Okay, it will show growth. It used to say 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. That verbiage got taken out. So those students, how do we know the growth of those students that are on our SLOs? Because the SLOs are a very big part of your calculation here.
Well, we're still looking at NWEA data. We're still looking at MSTEP data.
So if a student is not covered with a SLO, their growth is not measured. There's only measured with the NWA and MSTEP.
Correct.
Other board members have questions? Obviously, this is information and discussion. You will have the opportunity. This is a lot to digest, so if there are questions that you have for Mr. Dinkelman or Mr. Kinzer, you can send them to Dr. Matthews or directly to either one of them with additional questions. I would request that if you do send questions, that you just make sure you reply all so that the whole board kind of all gets the same information. That would be really helpful. And
Great.
So certainly as things come up,
If you do have questions that you choose to email, if you could send them to both Mr. Dinkelman and me, that would be great.
Send Dr. Kinzer all the math ones.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, we have the appointment of the OCSBA representative, Dr. Matthews.
So each year, we ask, we, meaning the Oakland County School Boards Association, ask every member district Board of Education to appoint a trustee to the OCSBA Government Relations Committee, which in years past has been called the Legislative Committee. The appointed trustee will be asked to attend Government Relations Committee meetings and will serve as your board contact for the legislative communications. The OCSBA is asking that the board make this appointment no later than January 31st. The Government Relations Committee meetings are held monthly at Oakland schools on a Wednesday evening from 6:30 to 8 p.m. The week of monthly meetings will be determined by availability of the majority of appointees. All trustees are encouraged to attend Government Relations meetings, not just the appointees. The Government Relations Committee does not meet in July or August. In odd years, the December meeting is an optional social dinner gathering. In even years, the December meeting may be added if education-related legislation is moving during lame duck. And so we present this tonight as for information and discussion. You'll see a recommendation there. If someone on the board chooses to serve in this capacity, we would bring this back at our next meeting with the recommendation completed.
Right. I did have some interest expressed by Mrs. Hood and Mrs. Ruskin that in serving on this committee. I don't know if there's other board members that were likewise interested in that. Obviously, since anyone can go, it doesn't just have to be appointees.
Can we just have them arm wrestle or something?
No, actually, I would like to have Mrs. Hood go. I think that my interest was based on if we did not have a representative, I think it's very important for Novi to be represented and not just to leave it empty and vacant, but I would love to let Mrs. Hood have an opportunity and I can attend the meetings as I'm available.
You can keep her company on that drive
Yep,
out to
we
Pontiac.
can
carpool. Okay.
In fact, I think Mrs. Hood would be perfect for this role.
There you- I'm sure you do, Mr.
Yes,
Mena.
I do.
Okay, so without, if no one else is dying to arm wrestle Kathy, I guess I should say, next week when we come back, we'll just have
2
your
weeks.
name in that and to approve that. Oh, 2 weeks, excuse me, at the next meeting. Okay, I did just have, in case you were dying to know of the other opportunities to serve, we do have several other opportunities. The Novi Educational Liaison, we have a Community Education Liaison, and then we have 2 standing committees, the Finance Committee and Board Governance and Policy, and right now we have 2 ad hoc committees, a Merit Pay Committee and a Capital Projects Committee. So you don't necessarily have to voice your interest right now to me, but we'll do the assigning to the committees. If there's something that you're dying to do, or you are dying absolutely not to do, get that information to me, preferably by Monday, or you can. Yeah.
Capital projects.
You
Can we
already.
just tell you now?
You can.
Me too.
No, if you
You didn't
voice,
mention it.
if you voice
Yes, I
your
did.
opinions
It's
now,
an ad hoc committee.
we'll have Ms. Holly
Okay,
take
sorry.
notes so that we have the list.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
I have an interest in being the Novi Educational Foundation liaison. And
Should
I
we
have-
check with the Nova Education Foundation to make sure that they have that same
The
interest?
Smith brothers are back!
Oh, my gosh.
And I also would like to step into my predecessor, Mrs. Stevenson's role as being the Merit Pay Committee. Some role on that.
Okay. You'd like to be on the
I'd like to finish the work I started.
Okay. Fantastic. Glad you boy came prepared for that. I can't answer questions too. I know that you guys are new, like in terms of how often they meet and things like that. Well, really, I think the Finance Committee met, 3 times this past year? So they'll review the budget and go over that. The Capital Projects Committee kind of gets called when I don't think that we'll really have any
Capital
need for that
projects
until.
will be more active this year because of the potential bond that we're looking at. So if you're interested in that, there will probably be March and April, there'll be several meetings. And we would ask the Capital Projects Committee be part of those meetings that we would have in March and April. Beyond that, the Capital Projects Committee, if the board does choose to go for a bond, would probably meet with our architects and construction manager on a regular and ongoing basis as we move forward.
Okay. Board Governance and Policy deals with policy and board operating procedures. We did just go through all of that. We do have
It will be a less commitment.
It will be far less of a commitment this year. My guess is maybe that it would also meet quarterly. It is important that we review policies periodically. So depending on how many new policies get dictated from legislation, it kind of dictates how much we
It
might be
appears
implementing.
Luskin-Albertsons kind of updates their policies twice a year.
So it will be far less. And then if there is a need to go over a board operating procedure or something, that would go to committee too. So those are a couple of those. So those two. Merit pay is there's just going to be until we resolve what we want to do. with
No,
merit.
we have a merit pay plan.
Yes, we currently have one.
The question is, do we want to enhance it, change it, modify it?
Having some discussion about that for teachers. So you can
Teachers and administrators.
contact me about that, send me a quick email, say these are the things that I think I'm interested in, or contact me with any questions, or maybe send Dr. Matthews too, because there might be questions you could answer, like the capital projects. I wouldn't necessarily know how often you were thinking that they would need to meet. So just some food for thought, but if you do have other questions. I know some of you I wrote down.
Right, and we'll talk about that. And the other comment that I had along that line, and it kind of segues into the next topic, is I really do think that at some point we should consider either a curriculum committee or at least a committee of the whole to from time to time to discuss curriculum issues. Obviously on information, we've got yet another class coming before us, and so I've expressed my concern about all of these continuously coming before. I have. So.
Well, just to let you know, that it does take 3 people to serve on every committee. So that is one thing that I omitted to say. So there's 3 people on every committee. So typically, everybody serves in about 2 roles, give or take. So just keep that in mind. And if there's, several that you say, I don't really know what I want to serve in, I'm happy to assign you a spot. Okay? So please get that information to me. The next is our Detroit history course, Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Christopher White, teacher at Novi High School, would like to propose the Novi High School begin offering a Detroit history course beginning in the fall of 2019 at Novi High School. Detroit history serves to fill a hole that exists in our current social studies curriculum, fostering understandings of local history, particularly in the southeast Michigan, and its connection with wider historical trends around America and the world. This course would align each and every unit of instruction closely with the C3 framework for social studies, specifically using its 4-dimensional arc of inquiry to guide every unit of instruction around a particular historical investigation. I would ask Dr. Weber to kind of provide kind of a bigger framework of how courses come before the board. This is related to the policy that the board adopted recently, that any new courses offered in the district need to come before the board for approval. So Dr. Weber, if you want to provide some context.
Certainly. So the new course proposal process is really germane to, and I know the board members have a graphic that we created today for you in front of you, is germane primarily to the high school.
Wait.
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So first, the idea, and the staff or building administrators see the need for a new course to enhance department curriculum. Then research and documentation. The teacher initiates, completes review process and evaluation paperwork. Documents such as textbook or software evaluation instruments are created. So really, the core component of these first 2 pieces, an idea is great, but an idea without execution or work really just stays an idea. And the bulk of the work occurs from the teacher or teachers who are putting together the class. So for instance, this evening we have Mr. White here, and the evidence of his work is in front of you and has been in front of you and available to you via board books. The same format that Mr. White used is the same format that you would see coming in front of you from any other courses that are there. So again, the idea is there. And usually what will happen in the early stages is the teacher would always talk to the building principal. Principal Carter has been with us here all night tonight, as well as Principal Asher I see back there. At the elementary level, really there's not so much of a need for this. This is why, as a board, you see curricular decisions or curricular opportunities coming primarily from the high school in the form of electives and courses like that. When it comes to our curricular decisions from a broad basis through the larger pieces, those are things that are adopted, researched, and worked on by principals, teachers, and so on. So let's go to review and approval. The new course proposal is reviewed and approved by the building principal, the assistant superintendent of academics, and cabinet. So, for instance, for Mr. White's class, what happened is Principal Carter came, myself, a number of my team met, and we reviewed, had our own questions, put that back to Mr. White and so on. It was determined that this was a course that was worthy of coming forward to the Board of Education. So that's the green bar, the final bar on here, which is the presentation to the Board of Education. Final new course proposal is presented to the Board of Education for review, approval, or to be not approved. So I think the piece here is sometimes folks think that, or may not have an understanding of how a class comes to be, or they may say in passing, gosh, we really need a class in this. Okay. And if that's something you feel strongly about, then we go forth and you do the work to get there and we go through the process. So there will be times where somebody say they may want or like a class but don't do the necessary work to carry through to get to where we are tonight, which is in front of you all. And really I'm happy that Mr. White is here tonight because I think that your application was quite thorough and answered our questions quite well. Dr. Matthews, does that help?
That provides a good overview, Dr. Weber. Could you, before we get to Mr. White, just address issues related to choice at the high school especially?
Certainly. So the schedule at the high school is predicated on student choice. So courses will only run if a number of students, 20 or more, Principal Carter, I believe, choose that course. So here's the gamble, so to speak. Mr. White, how long would you say it took to put this together?
Probably altogether somewhere in the tens of hours.
Okay.
So probably like 30 hours or so.
So 30 hours of work. Mr. White believes that this is a class that the kids want, that the kids would go toward. And Mr. White will be heartbroken, I'm sure, if 18 kids choose it and it doesn't run. But this is the beauty of the teachers that we have here at Novi, and the beauty of the teachers we have at Novi High School who are willing to do this sort of thing. We've seen this year a couple of times and last year a number of times, who are willing to come, do that work, be in front of us here tonight, take the scrutiny of the board, to provide an opportunity for kids to take that class. And if they choose to take that class, great. If we fill a section or two and it goes well, wonderful. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And really that's the idea, Dr. Matthews, is that our community high school, students drive our schedule. And Principal Carter can tell you the hours that she spends up trying to arrange that schedule as the choices come in and you're trying to work it out. But really, it's pretty amazing to work in a community school district that allows that type of choice.
One final comment before Mr. White begins. Just to give you some kind of scope, think of the high school, 2,000 students, 6 periods a day, 2 semesters. We have 12,000 spots we need to put students during first semester, and 12,000 spots we need to put students in second semester. And so over the course of a year, we have 24,000 spots that we have to put students. And so we have one of the deepest and broadest course books in the state of Michigan, primarily because we have wonderful teachers like Mr. White who take the time to identify what he believes and what the social studies department believes is a meaningful opportunity for students. And so whether or not it runs is entirely up to probably 2 factors. One, Mr. White's enthusiasm for the course as he talks to students in the high school, and his ability to sell the course to those students. So, Mr. White, we would like you to kind of introduce this course to the board.
Yes, so this course is largely designed to fill what the Social Studies Department believes to be a small gap in some of the social studies electives offered at the high school. So currently a lot of social studies electives are targeting particular kinds of social studies courses that are not in the core academics. So this would be like sociology or big history. But there is another sort of element to a lot of the social studies electives that's not being targeted, which is kind of a community building element, specifically with an attachment to community service or building kind of local Michigan connections. I know many of you probably had Michigan history as a requirement because it used to be a requirement at the state a really long time ago.
Whoa.
Not so
my
I mean, it was, I guess it wasn't so long ago, but...
Mr. Mata, was that before Toledo?
Right, exactly. But it's not anymore, right? So for the most part, local history has sort of been thrown out the window. And for a lot of our students who are in upper level courses, like I teach AP European history, right? There's many options for really interesting, engaging history courses when you want to take an AP class. But when it comes to non-AP classes, there aren't as many interesting options. So Detroit history is supposed to kind of fill that gap. I also have a background and a focus in Detroit history when I went to school at U of M. I have several people kind of lined up who actually want to speak at Novi, which is really exciting. And so it's a combination of a few kind of the gaps that are sort of missing from the curriculum. And when it comes to kind of addressing the issue of the schedule, again, I would sort of say it's all about choice, right? So if the students don't want to do it, if they're not interested in Detroit history, and I'm wrong, and I have read the room incorrectly, then so be it. But I do have a feeling that they will, otherwise I would not have taken all the time to prepare it and present it.
One final question for Mr. White. How long have you been a teacher at Novi High School, Mr. White?
So this is my third year as a paid teacher. I also student taught here before that.
I think he's reflective of the quality of scholarship that we have at Novi High School, and so we appreciate you coming to the board tonight with this.
And an example of really the innovation is times do change and interests of students do change. How do we really attend to that? We attend to that with the teachers we have, and as Dr. Matthews said, teachers like Mr. White.
So, thank you. Thanks for the thorough sharing of information. Do we have board members have questions?
Yeah, question. You mentioned Michigan history. Do we offer a Michigan history course?
No, not at the high school.
Not at the high school. I'm kind of surprised. It's a family. My family's been in Michigan before Michigan was a state, so it's. I find it actually very interesting.
Yeah, the third grade is where Michigan history is seated. And,
yes, I understand we do it down at the lower levels, but we don't have it at the high school. Okay, this goes back to as an elective.
Mm-hmm.
And the question has been brought up by board members in the past, if we're offering so many electives, and I know the students can choose anything, and is there a way that at the end of the year we can see, what courses didn't run because, and this has nothing to do with your Detroit history, but because there wasn't the take rate that we needed to run them, and see where we stand on some of those? I think it would be beneficial so we can get an idea of
we can provide a report to the board that would identify these are the courses that did not run. Now, we must be transparent that occasionally there are courses that run with less than 20 students, primarily because they may be a new course, they may be a course, IB courses have at times run with less than 20 because they're part of a sequence that they need to get their diploma. We ran a robotics course last year at the high school of less than 20 because we were hoping to, and this year they more than doubled their enrollment in that course, and so there are times when we'll run less than 20, but overall the number is 20 or higher that we look for to run courses. But we can provide a report, and I'll work with Ms. Carter to get that information to the board.
Okay. Choosing Detroit history, because of your background, I understand, and it's a much broader range than actually Michigan history would be at that point. Well over 300 years versus 120, 100.
Yeah, and to clarify, if I can, we would be Detroit, and largely would extend outside of Detroit too. Southeast Michigan would sort of be the focus. Obviously, Southeast Michigan history is rooted in Detroit, so that's sort of where our home base is in the course. But definitely Novi would come up in the course,
So
right?
you would break it up into early history,
Yes.
all the way through a little bit more modern time, or
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly materials you guys have in front of you.
We have the units.
We
Yeah.
have everything.
Yeah, so there's the units, sort of, the kind of outline of the units of instruction on there, yeah.
Mrs. Hood?
Well, as a native Detroiter, I guess, I was excited when I saw this class. And I did read all 53 pages that you sent us, and I also ordered the textbook from Amazon. But from a bigger perspective, Detroit is a really cool city, and I think it is a kind of a microcosm of the country, and I think our kids are lucky to live here. Because Detroit really has been involved in world history.
Yes.
And Willow Run. I mean, good grief. I was wrong in my geography. I thought Henry Ford delivered his airplanes into Washtenaw County, but it was the opposite.
Right.
So there's so much that happened here. And I was reading something else related to the high school this week, and something stuck out to me, which was that one of the goals in the high school is to make the big small. And I don't know if I interpreted that correctly, but in my mind, I was thinking, here we have Detroit, and as you have laid out in the curriculum from really when we were part of the Underground Railroad to World War II, to the unions, to World War II. I mean, we have just a tremendous spectrum of what Detroit has lived through. So I hope the kids jump on this class. I think it would be really, they would also see what we have here. And anyway, so I'm a big fan. I hope we get lots of kids. Thank you.
Any board members have questions for Mr. White about the class?
So again, this is a information and discussion item. So if after you heard the discussion this evening, after you look at the materials again, if you have additional questions, please route them either through Dr. Weber or myself, and we will get them to Mr. White so we can answer the questions for the board. But this would come back to the board for approval at the next board meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay. I just want to say real quick, because you made a good point that I thought of when I was looking this over, is that we do have a lot of options for some of the social studies at AP and IB, but there's a lot of other kids that maybe don't fit those bills. And we've talked a little bit I've talked a little bit with some board members just about the fact that those kids that are kind of in that middle group, and we talk a lot about the high end, we talk about the low end, but some of those kids in the middle that could probably use some of those. I was excited too. I don't know enough. I'm from Ohio originally, so I
Sorry to hear that.
So I do not know enough. I went to Michigan.
Okay, there you go.
Redeem myself.
You can have your Toledo strip.
So I was excited. I didn't think about ordering the book. I mean, that's a little
I read the
overachieving,
review,
but maybe I could borrow it when you're
I read
done.
the reviews online, and everybody it got very good reviews. Except for the people who listened to it, and the guy pronounced Gratiot or something.
Yeah, you can't do that. That's
Right.
not allowed. You
Okay.
can't pronounce Gratiot Gratiot.
So this will come back if there
What
are
do we do with Shaner?
if there are additional questions that you think of or concerns that you have, please get those to Dr. Matthews in advance of the next meeting so that we can come back and be prepared to vote on this. And thank you for being here, Mr. White. It was nice to meet you. I did think you were students sitting up there. So your comment about how old we were thinking the opposite.
Yeah. Sorry.
Anyways, okay,
It wasn't
terrific.
supposed to be that kind of comment, but
That's
all right,
okay.
Thank you, Mr. White.
You're forgiven.
Thank you.
We won't forget you.
Next is our second opportunity for comments from the audience. These would be comments related to anything within our jurisdiction. If there is anyone that would like to approach the podium and speak to the board about anything in our jurisdiction, we just ask that you fill out a green card. I'm seeing no one. I'm seeing them running for the door now, so I'm thinking that's a no. So we will move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Invitations have been sent for community members, staff, students, parents, teachers, administrators to participate in our strategic planning process. We have several opportunities. Our MSB facilitator will be in our district 2 times in January to talk with a wide variety of people in input sessions. Additionally, we'll have an all-day session on Saturday, February 23rd. We've also sent an online survey to our community and staff asking for input about the district as we prepare for our February 23rd meeting. MASB has a protocol of whom to invite. We have tried to get a broad cross-section of participants so that we hear from a variety of voices in the district. As was mentioned by our student board report, our Novi High School Unified Basketball team has begun their season. The Unified team is made up of special education and general education students playing on the same court at the same time. Our Novi High School team and teams from around the KLA Conference will be playing at Novi High School on Monday, January 14th, from 4 to 9 p.m. It's a double header. They have special referees for Monday evening. Ms. Murphy and I will be there to
keep
You should not
everybody
laugh, Ms.
to keep everyone safe.
That's funny.
And they will also play on Tuesday, February 5th, and on Thursday, February 21st. The board will not be able to participate in the Thursday, February 21st, because that is a board meeting evening. So we apologize for that. On February 21st, all 13 unified teams from the KLAA conference will be at Novi High School for the first ever unified tournament. Our Novi High School Philharmonic Orchestra and our Novi Singers, as was mentioned by our student board member report, will perform at the Michigan Music Conference in Grand Rapids. These groups were asked to perform based on audition material that they had to submit, and it is quite an honor to be chosen to perform. The orchestra performs on Friday, January 25th at 2 p.m., and the choir performs at 1:15 on Saturday. Both performances will take place in the beautiful performance hall that is in the Grand Rapids Convention Center. And that's my report for this evening.
Terrific, thank you.
Ask a quick question.
Certainly.
I know you mentioned the dates. I know you mentioned the dates for the unified team. Is there a way that we could publish those dates for,
Yeah.
for the public? It would be
Yep.
great.
Yes, we will share that. We'll get with the athletic department share. We'll also share them out in listserv material so that
Yeah,
everybody.
Make sure they're on the athletic calendar too.
Right. Yep. We will work on that.
And they may even be televised too.
Oh, no.
We've had them on Pixel.
Yeah.
I know.
Do
I'm
you
just-
realize as
I'm reffing.
referees, you run almost as much as the kids?
Yes, we do.
And on average, probably 2 to 3 miles.
Well, I'll be
I can handle it.
directing Miss Murphy.
I'm
where
up
to
for
go.
it, thank you.
I'm not
So,
doubting
Ms.
her.
Murphy, you will be running 5 to 7 miles.
Oh, great. That I might not be up for. All right, next is our administrative reports. Ms. Minnick.
Thank you, President Murphy. This evening, I just want to make you aware of 2 bids that will be brought to the Board of Education in February or March for recommendation using remaining 2014 bond funds. And that includes a musical instrument bid for band and orchestra at Meadows Middle School and High School, and also a furniture bid for remaining classroom furniture needs and cafeteria tables and the like. So just wanted to put that on your radar. Thank you.
Appreciate the heads up. Dr. Kinzer.
I have no report this evening.
Okay. Thank you for the student growth report. It was very helpful. And Dr. Weber.
Today I had the pleasure of visiting Oakland Tech Southwest campus. The visit was arranged by Sheila Ebel, health teacher at the high school. Emily Polonsky was here earlier tonight. Kathy Ferris and Sarah Leppard, counselor at the high school. Kathy Ferris is our district nurse. And we went there with the intent of seeing how they have their own teaching lab set up for students going into the health and medical fields. So they have a mock hospital room and so on. And the reason for that really is because, as you heard, HOST has 300 members. We have our Med Careers program with Providence Park Hospital, which is a dynamic arrangement and a relationship that's been occurring for some time. In thinking, looking forward, and thinking about the potential of what could we do at our own high school and to replicate that to an extent so our own kids could get that. And I know the board has a deep interest in career readiness and prep. Dr. Matthews and I, as we've talked about this and thought about things like advanced manufacturing and things of that nature, really in our community, the wheelhouse of that piece is if you look at Providence Park Hospital, and you look at it, you just think of doctors and nurses. It's actually its own city. There are hundreds of different jobs within that space. As such, because we're one of the few community school districts that still has a viable career prep program, an adult ed program, I'd like us to start thinking about as a community school board, what would it look like to put a similar type of space over in the high school area, one that could be used at night. We could do, for instance, certifying folks in phlebotomy through our advanced or our career prep. Also, that space could be used for our health classes. It could be used to train folks in CPR and so on. So, trying to get ahead of the game a little bit, but I'd like us to just start getting our heads around as we think about getting our kids ready for careers in the future. What strengths do we already have in Novi? I think indisputably one of those strengths is health and medicine. What relationships do we really currently have that are strong? Providence Park is there. And I think that there's an opportunity for us in the future, perhaps, to provide some skills for our kids that can turn into real money without them having to go into debt, as well as advance the careers of future doctors, nurses in our community. So I'd like to thank those 4 women for putting that together, and it was amazing. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for the report. Board communication, are there things that the board has participated in? I know it's the start to the year. So there, yes?
Two quick ones.
Mr. Smith?
I found out on Tuesday that as part of the Novi Youth Assistance, that they received a new grant that is appropriate for students that would be in 8th grade, and they've got a pretty decent amount of money, and they're going to establish a scholarship opportunity for any 8th grade students that might not be able to afford the trip to Washington. So it's, I wanted to bring that to your attention. So more information will be made available through the Novi Youth Assistance website.
Awesome.
The other thing I have is just a question. I don't know if there's any board members that are involved in scouting, but my son is a scout, first class, and starting next month, as you may know, females are now invited to join scouts as well. So I don't know if that's something that's outside of the district or how that works. I know that at the elementary school, the scouts used to actually meet at the schools, but I wanted to just ask for your help after tonight's meeting as a discussion piece, if you can get with me, if it would be appropriate for us to communicate to the young women that are in our district that there's this opportunity now, and that if they chose, they could join a scout troop in addition to still staying on and achieving their gold status, if you will, as a Girl Scout. The new thing now for a young lady that would be maybe 12 or 13 would be to attain something called the Gold Eagle, which would be very unique in that they could be the first young lady to get their Gold Girl Scout and their Eagle Scout. I think it's a great program. I'm biased because my son's on his way to getting his Eagle Scout, so I just wanted to make you guys aware of that and see if there's a way we could communicate that across the district.
Maybe that's
Yep,
something for
we'll
the
talk
elementary
about it.
schools.
Okay, so we'll talk about with our building level administrators as well.
Perfect.
Okay. Other boards, members have communication?
Nothing in particular. I did want to welcome our new members.
Yeah. Yeah. Welcome.
Thanks. I have a couple things. So Above and Beyond award nominations, the deadline is coming up. Online, if you go under Student Services, under the website, you should be able to find the application and submitting any staff member, student that is here in Novi Community School District. And then I don't think that there's been a board meeting since the Village Oaks amazing
Ribbon.
celebration.
Right.
And it was a beautiful celebration, and it was very ceremonious and wonderful, but really the joy was watching the children sing from each class and just listening to their beautiful voices with their, you know, their teacher who was leading them. And it was a really special day, so I
Very
really
impressive.
enjoyed going there.
Fabulous seeing how many former teachers they got to come back.
And seeing
To-
the two
to
principals,
see
the
them.
two previous
Yeah.
principals on
Yeah.
the stage, and really,
It was a
Yeah.
wonderful event, and certainly well-deserved blue ribbon ceremony. They did a nice job with that, yeah, it was. Thanks for bringing that up, because that was some time ago. I know. So, other board members? No? All right.
Well, I'll just add to the CPAC and the Above and Beyond. It's for teachers and students, and the one area that's usually very underrepresented are the students. So if you see a student helping out a special needs kid, go ahead, nominate them. They're very underrepresented for all they do.
Do you know what the deadline is?
I do believe I thought it was the 14th.
I think it's
but-
coming up right before the MLK break, so
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
maybe
So it'd
next
be
week.
the end of
it
next
is,
week.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'll be
But
on,
yeah,
I'll be watching on Monday.
And Mr. Cook is right, if you see a student as an administrator or as a teacher, or encourage your teachers, so we do have a rubric where we really do not like to look at the nominations of parents nominating their own children, although those are the people that are seeing really what their kiddos are doing. It's so nice to come from another community member, seeing the students acting in that regard, so.
Great. Good feedback. All right, fantastic. Well, thank you. I know it's been a little bit of a long meeting this evening, but just definitely well worth it with our student growth report. I know that took up some time, but definitely get questions in advance to the meetings, and we will see something about what courses did not run at the end of the year at some point. I'm not sure if there is other things, and maybe a report back about communications camp after we get done, of some kind of follow-up, whether it's the survey results or something. All right, fantastic. Well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion that we adjourn our meeting tonight?
Thank you. It's been moved by Mr. Smith and supported by Mrs. Roney, who's now in the minutes now. Terrific. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, everyone.